Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my Sip and Stitch and Bitch with the creative Contessa. I'm actually going to be working on a series of repairs today because Handsome, could you bring me the bodice of my yarn? Because I need to actually try on the bodice of my pink Gamora and measure the skirts out to see how much I need to take off of the skirts, because I've actually changed my mind on what I'm going to be doing with this. Anyway, if you are out there, please let me know if you can hear me or not. Otherwise, we'll just kind of wait until people stream in to get really started. But I actually do have today a bunch of books to share with everyone, some rare and unusual books of interest to medievalists and other practitioners of living history or people just history in medieval material culture in general. So yeah. This morning I have more of my tea from the green tea plantation in Chiang Rai, northern Thailand. So I'll be enjoying that Asianly medieval drink, but definitely not a medieval beverage in Europe, but that's okay. In honor of the multiculturalism that is my life, I'm drinking out of a replica of a Koryo era Celadon teacup. So yeah. Perfect. Thank you, Angelica. Good morning, Catherine. Lovely to see you this morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Fantastic. Well, let's see how long we can hear each other and see each other. So just so everyone knows, don't go away if the stream cuts briefly. Give it a minute or two to restore. They have been doing street work on our street, and unfortunately, I think they may have cut into some lines or are somehow impacting our internet reception. So we've had very spotty internet all week, as in the middle of opening a web page and it just fails, tells me I have no internet, and then 30 seconds later comes back. So here's hoping that the technology holds out. So what's everyone working on this morning? As I said, I will be doing many things. I'll be doing some repairs. I actually finished raising the hem of the bodice of my pink Gamora a bit, but not too much, because I actually decided I didn't want to make it too much shorter in the waist. It's already relatively short on my long torso. So I raised it just a little bit. You can kind of see where it was before. I haven't ironed it out yet. Where it was before and where the bend is now, the fold is now. And that was just to create a little more thickness and stability so that when I reattach the skirts, replete and attach the skirts, then there will be more there to grab onto, so to say. But I've decided that actually I'm going to also shorten the skirts in the skirts are over there. Also going to shorten the skirts of the Gamora by hemming a little bit more on the top. So all those stitches I put in to hold all those carefully anchored pleats in place, I'm going to have to undo all of that now and just completely redo the pleating of the skirts. But that's okay. That's how it goes. Good morning, Laurie. It's lovely to actually see you in one of the live streams. Thank you for joining. As always, the format is chat away. Let me know what you're working on. If you have questions about anything that I'm either working on or things you've seen in my video, or questions about medieval living history and medieval material culture that you think I might have an idea about, please pop them in the chat. On our end, we've actually got some interesting projects in the works. We are working on a new farsetto for my condottiero. And that's kind of stalled. We're in the fitting stage for that because we're reworking the old pattern for several reasons. One, his body's a different shape now than it was 12 years ago, but also I have a better understanding about construction of farsetti based on Diego di Cavaniglia's extant farsetto that was very clearly also used for arming. So we have to rework some of the key fitting aspects of that. And that can be a bit of a process because I am in essence reinventing the wheel. 15th century tailors already knew how their patterns worked. They weren't trying to rediscover a dead art. They were living in a living art that had been handed down to them. So they had it a lot easier than we do. We modern medievalists do, trying to recreate these historic garments. Yeah, so we've got that, and we're going to be starting medieval pouch workshops, and we're going to look at doing that via Zoom. We're going to do an in-person one here in Korea, and then we're going to do one, going to look at rolling out a workshop via Zoom. So this will be a 15th century leather pouch, and a replica of a historical original, and it actually has a slot in the back of it for your bollocks dagger. So that's always nice to be able to, carry your dagger and your pouch in one area. So yeah, that's what we will basically be looking at. We'll be doing a pouch workshop will be coming up, so check out my website for that actually. And the condottiera's farsetto, and I'll be putting together a vlog on that. And in the meanwhile, today I'm just going to work on a whole bunch of repairs, because the thing about living medievally in your garments like I do, they actually wear out, which is why I'm always so astounded by these people who, talk about needing to wear their garments out so they look medieval. And I just say, I wear my garments and then they wear out and then they look medieval. Handsome, do you know where the snips went?
Yes.
So what I've got to do, I already reattached the lower rings on my Gamora bodice here. And now I'm just going to, now that that's all set, I'm going to actually go ahead and readjust the top two lacing rings here. So I'm going to just undo my beautiful lacing ring stitches. Look at those, so gorgeous. Oh, I'm going to undo it and reposition it to be a little higher, to be basically right under the trim there. And this is how the trim turned out. I'm really super happy with it. Yeah, actually worked out pretty well. That joint is only a little messy, but I was actually thinking if I care hard enough about the joint between the two lengths of finger loop braid, I could actually go in and take thread some of this gold and green silk and actually like stitch the pattern back into this spot where it's a little messy from the joint. We'll see how much I care about it though. Right now, not so much. And you can see there's also some spots where threads have popped or whatever that I have to go and put those back. That's not surprising. That's an area of high tension on my body, on my very mobile body. Commenting back to the comment on wear and tear. So there are, especially in Europe, not so much in the US, especially in Europe, there are reenactors who will pay a shoemaker to put a tear in the shoe and put in a repair that is exactly like the repairs we see in the archaeological finds, so that it makes them feel like their shoes are more authentic. My response to that is, that's akin to buying jeans that are pre-worn out these days. These designer Prada jeans that have massive rips and holes and hanging string from them. I make my jeans look like that after wearing them for about a year. I don't need to pay for them to start that way. So the same thing with my medieval footwear. I wear through my medieval footwear. It's ripe for all the kinds of period medieval repairs you could possibly want to do. Every kind that you've seen in archaeological find, I've got at least one shoe that could use at least one of those repairs, and probably all of my shoes could use all of them. So I don't need to pay for a shoe that's already damaged. I'm going to damage it on my own. It's a very weird modern concept. Medieval people would not have wanted to buy things that were already worn out and repaired. The secondhand market was aimed at people who did, but the secondhand market was aimed at the not so well-to-do. So anyone who wanted to put on a good impression would not have paid extra for clothing that had flaws in it and that had repairs in it. They would have paid less, significantly less. So yeah, your medieval clothes should start out new, and then, over time you can wear them out and do all the repairs you want to them, but I do not recommend adding an intentional tear. Oh, speaking of repairs, this little guy, if you look in the sewing screen, and hopefully the camera will not mess with me here, this is the repair I did on that TSA snip where they were looking for drugs in my clothes and my suitcases and didn't tell me that they'd cut into my brand new, never yet worn Gamora. So I did basically a buttonhole stitch to basically take the edges and pull them together and add strength. And I did that on both sides. Sorry, the camera, there we go. And I did that on both sides. So that is the repair I went with. I did it in yellow silk thread because that's what I had on hand. And I don't think I actually have any pink at the moment. And I couldn't find my white at the moment. And it's okay because it basically vanishes into the edge of the garment. So I don't really care about that. Good morning, Joshua. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, goodness. This message is held for review, dare I ask. Medieval women didn't show their boobs. Well, that's patently not true. And also, you cannot see my boobs, as it were. Like, they're down here. I don't know. This is called my décolleté. This is my chest. Medieval women absolutely wore dresses that showed cleavage. Sorry, this isn't the late 19th century. This is the 15th century, 14th and 15th century, especially in Bohemia and Germany. We're talking completely off the shoulder and really round apples popping out from the top. So, yeah. That is absolutely not true. Medieval women definitely showed cleavage. All you have to do is look in 15th century art and you will see. Late 14th and 15th. And then in the 16th century, yes, you will see. Now, it was getting cold, so their dresses might have a low neckline like this, but then they would wear something over top of their chest to keep them warm in the winter. That's a separate kind of garment called a colette. Or a colletto in Italian, and there's a different word in French, in 15th century French. I tripped across it the other day and I can't remember what it was. Anyway, the colletto in Italian is that white thing that you see pinned over top of a camorra usually, and then the golar is kind of like the heavy German Holy Roman Empire version of that, the Saxon version of that, and then in 15th century France, they had something that was like a golar, and there's a specific 15th century French word for it, and I can't remember what it is. But they also had them. But they only wore that when it was cold. Otherwise, they were very happy to be bold. Yeah. So, what is everyone working on this morning? Catherine says she's working on sleeves still. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the compliment that it's a very fine mend. Yeah, I was happy how it turned out considering how jagged it was. They didn't even cut straight into it. They cut at this weird diagonal way like this. Like literally they took snips like this and cut like this, open it up to peer inside, saw that it was literally nothing but fabric, layers of fabric, put it back in my suitcase and pretended like nothing had happened. I mean, talk about frustrating. When they could have just as easily cut this way, cut the stitches, pop the stitches open here and looked inside. But no, they didn't do that. Anyway, so there. I don't even always wear my clothes out. Apparently TSA agents wear them out for me too. So that's great. Show that. Okay. So Joshua, are you working on anything this morning? One of my regulars, Ardens, he sent me some pictures of the giornea that he actually put together in sort of combination with my videos and his readings and that sort of stuff. And it looked really good. I'm always happy to see pictures of your work, guys. So if you can find me on any of the social media and send me a message with pictures of what you're working on, I'm always happy to check them out. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on TikTok. So yeah, obviously on YouTube. I mean, you're watching me here. So I'm just trying to make sure I get all these little stitches out because, when I attach a lacing ring on, it's forever. Diamonds aren't forever. Lacing rings are forever in my world. So just trying to make sure I get all these little stitches out. And the wool kind of absorbs them a little bit, so. Oof, yeah. It's like doing microsurgery. Lisa says, I'm thinking of making my own gamora. Yeah, it's a great kind of dress to have. They're very comfortable. I call them magic dresses because I have one gamora, this green striped gamora, green and sort of gold/white striped gamora, that the first one I ever made actually 24 years ago. And it seems to fit everyone, no matter what height they are, no matter what shape of body. And I mean everything from super skinny to very pleasantly plump. It seems to somehow magically fit them all, which actually really tracks with the way women's bodies probably change shape pretty drastically in their productive years, shall we say, in the Middle Ages and in the 15th century in particular. because, you know, a lot of many women, married women especially, were kind of often in a cycle of pregnancy and not pregnancy and pregnancy and not pregnancy. And so their bodies were constantly shifting in size. Now, they might not have gained lots of weight in their limbs and their extremities, but certainly their abdomens would have changed drastically in size. And so having a gown that can respond to that agilely would have been very important. Uh, Let me see. Question. Greetings. What are we practicing today? Today I am replacing, I'm doing a whole bunch of different repairs. On my 15th century Florentine Camorra, I am repositioning this lacing ring. So you all are going to get to see how I do attach lacing rings. I use a buttonhole stitch actually. And then I've got a bunch of repairs, a pile of repair work next to me. So yeah, we have a myriad of items for me today. What is everyone else working on? Let me see. Lisa says, I have no idea how to draft my own pattern. Yeah, so pattern, there's two different ways to create a pattern. There is, you can draft a pattern, which is literally taking measurements and laying them out on the paper based on a tree that is designed with a specific shape, sort of the basic shapes of the Gomorrah, and then you cut it out and then you make adjustments. And then there's draping. Draping is absolutely a modern technique because it requires a lot of fabric be wasted. And this is certainly not something that people would have done in the Middle Ages because of the loss of the loss of fabric life would have been traumatic. And just you couldn't do that with the expensive medieval fabrics. But yeah, drafting is definitely its own skill. There are, I think I said, Lisa, was it you I was telling about the commercial patterns? Margot Anderson, I think, has a decent pattern, actually. If I didn't, then a decent commercial pattern would be, Margot Anderson has some really decent commercial patterns for 15th century Italian garments. I haven't personally used them because I don't really use commercial patterns. I tried it once and it sucked and I hated it, but tea leaf. Excuse me, sorry. Um, um, she, everyone I know who has used her pattern swears by them. They really like them. So I can recommend if you're feeling intimidated about drafting your own pattern, you might want to consider Margot Anderson's patterns. Let me see. Currently watching my brother make his first medieval shirt by himself tonight here. It's currently 8:16 p.m. your time. Oh, how's it going, Joshua? How's your brother handling it? So the first thing I do when I attach a lacing ring before I do anything else is I wax my thread. And we finally found our big giant lump of beeswax. So I'm just going to go ahead and wax my thread. If anyone wants to see, this is how I do it. I always start from the middle and work out in both directions. Well, roughly the middle. Doesn't have to be exactly the middle, but anyway. I actually put the thread between my thumb and the wax like this. And you don't want to pull too far away from the point of pressure. You want to readjust because if you pull too far away, eventually you're going to snap your thread. So I've got it now on the half and I just sort of take my thumb, after I've waxed it, I then run my fingers over it so the heat of my fingers kind of presses the wax into the thread. And then I find the spot where I started, roughly in the center, and then I pull in the other direction so that I can get right up to the base of the needle. And I do this after I've threaded it so that there doesn't end up being this, like when you thread pre-waxed thread, then a lot of the wax can end up on the needle eye. And I don't want that. I want the wax on my thread. So I always do it after I thread my needle. You know, your mileage may vary. Yeah. Margot Anderson is the name, Lisa, if you are interested in not struggling with drafting your own pattern. For me, honestly, making patterns is part of the fun. I love, it's like it's a spatial puzzle to me, and I just love that. So the first thing I do when I'm doing a lacing ring is, and actually in general, the first thing I do when I do anything by hand sewing is I anchor the thread. You know, if you're using a machine, this would be the part where you would backstitch over your line of stitching, or backstitch and then, you know, go forward over your line of stitching. In hand sewing terms, it's called anchoring the thread. And you do that separate, I do that anyway, separate of any stitching that I'm going to continue with. So the anchor is just the first thing, just to make sure that it is firmly in place in a way that is separate from the stitches I'm going to be doing. Let's see, he's handling it okay. New beginner mistakes, the usual stuff. Oh, that's great. Joshua, is he hand sewing, machine sewing, combination of the two? And were you working from a pattern or did you draft a pattern? So now that I've anchored my thread, I'm going to take my lacing ring. First, I'm going to try to get rid of these old threads that apparently I didn't entirely eliminate. They are irritating me. Okay. And now I will take this lacing ring, lay it on the fabric. Anchoring the thread is what you're teaching him right now. Yes. It's like a great minds think alike. What kind of shirt is it? Is it like the St. Louis shirt that's in Notre Dame Cathedral, or one of the other extant finds, or just, you know, something you kind of put together yourself based on whatever input you may have had? Yeah. And for those just joining, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button if you're enjoying watching. If you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. I've got eyes on the chat kind of in two places, actually. And what I'm working on right now is attaching a lacing ring. So I like to anchor my lacing rings first before going to the base and doing the fancy stitches here. So I actually just go around the ring part of the lacing ring and just put anchor stitches in there. I usually do 2. This also, depending on the kind of lacing ring you have, this prevents the ring from pulling up and away too much from the edge of the garment. And so it actually makes it secure a little bit better. So once I've done the anchor stitches on the second set of anchor stitches, the ring anchor stitches, because this is so thick, like this edge super thick, I've got lots of dimensionality to work with here. So I'm actually going to take the needle and angle it so that it comes up like this, but so that on the back side there's only a tiny little bit showing. Right, so that's how I always try to maximally bury as much of my stitches as possible inside the layers of fabric, because hard on my clothes I am. And so I always want to make sure that as little of the thread is exposed to me and my active lifestyle as possible. And I will tell you, I have never had these lacing rings come off. You may have seen how I struggled to get the stitches out. Yeah. Okay, so that's all nice and anchored there. Now I don't have to worry about it shifting when I continue the attachment process. And now I can focus on doing the pretty buttonhole stitches. So basically you don't have to, you can just do simple whip stitches. And if I were in a rush, then I probably would just put simple whip stitches around these rings. But I just like the look of the buttonhole stitch. So that's what we're going to go with. It's also more secure, and it will protect. The buttonhole stitch is actually protective. So a buttonhole stitch is not just about making a pretty buttonhole. It really is a protective stitch. It protects the thread from the friction of buttoning and unbuttoning. So using a buttonhole stitch here I'm doing that for basically the same reason. And also, I'm once more going to put my needle in right next to where it came out from that anchor stitch around the ring, and angle it so that it comes up here, once again burying most of the stitch inside the inner layers, so that you see there's hardly, what's that? Oh, that's where I made a mistake. Yes? That's where I made a mistake. Well, that's on me. So, but you'll see, you look at the other lacing rings, there's hardly any stitches to be seen on the surface. All the motion, all the transference of stitches is buried inside, right? On purpose. Let's see. Joshua says it's just a general white linen shirt. We're starting with his generic base garments. It's a fantasy, historical inspired Anglo-Saxon 14th century shirt. Awesome. Love it.
Fantasy Kingdom Come.
Yeah, like, are we talking Anglo-Saxon? Are we talking Fantasy Kingdom Come? Or for those who might be interested, tomorrow I will be hosting Philip from Irish Medieval History on this channel tomorrow morning for our collaborative, our live show. Tomorrow we are going to be talking about homosexuality in the Middle Ages, focusing mostly on the 15th century because the Middle Ages is a 1,000-year period and that's a lot of history to cover. But there will perforce need to be some discussion of things that came before because things that came before inform what happened in the 15th century. So for anyone who's interested in that topic, I'll be talking a little bit about sexual orientation and art and interpreting it or misinterpreting it. So if you are interested in a good conversation where we talk about history and, explore the sort of the homosexuality in a past era, then please do join in. It should be a pretty good time. Kind of fantasy Kingdom Come. Cool. Yeah, Kingdom Come. I don't know for those of you who tuned in last Sunday or Saturday/Sunday, depending on where you are. Most of you, I assume, probably it would have been Sunday. I was on Irish Medieval History, and we actually reviewed some of the clothing in the new Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 game. And so if you're interested in learning what's right and what's wrong, you should go check out the recording of that live stream. We streamed for almost 4 hours. And had a lot of good questions too, some practical questions like how do you create medieval dyes, that sort of thing. Yeah, the clothing in the new Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 game is a mixed bag. They've improved in a lot of ways, and in other ways, sie haben es verschlimmbessert, as they say in German. So yeah, tomorrow morning, the live stream on homosexuality in the Middle Ages will be at 7 a.m. Seoul time because I'm in Korea right now. 7 a.m. Seoul time. That will be 9 p.m. Let me think about this. 10 p.m. Ireland Saturday. And then I guess 5 p.m. Saturday, New York. Yeah, this whole, global world thing, it's complicated when it comes to time zones and dates and scheduling things like live streams across the globe. Yeah, I anticipate it should be a really good chat, and we will be moderating the chat, and there will be no room for toxicity in the chat. This is supposed to be a civilized historical conversation. I will not tolerate bigotry and name calling. And in fact, I was getting all my notes together for this, and I happened to do a Google search, and I just did. Sometimes it's interesting just to see what the internet will show you if you ask a question. And I didn't even ask a question. I just said homosexuality in medieval Bohemia, just to see what people are saying. And it is amazing how many people really believe that homosexuality did not exist before the 21st century. It's very strange. So yeah, this will be a safe space, and I will not tolerate anything less than that. But also I'm not here to distort the historical record. We're going to be talking about the facts. We're going to be talking about legal cases. We're going to be talking about art and depiction in art, and how that can or cannot be used as a way to understand medieval homosexuality. We're going to be talking about sexual orientation, although not in the way people might be expecting, because medieval sexual orientation their worldview was very different from ours. It was just very, very different. And the evidence that we have points to there being a different kind of orientation that is nothing like we understand it to be. It'll be a good talk. Yeah.
You're gonna give it all away today.
Yeah, I'm not going to give it all away today. You have to tune in tomorrow. Yeah. Oh, I should have washed my hands. Okay, so people, if you are working, with any fabric, you should really wash your hands before you start doing hand sewing, and I didn't do that. But especially if you're working with white thread because the white thread, I don't know if it's coming across in this camera, the white thread will not stay white for very long if you haven't freshly washed your hands, because the oils on your hands pick up every kind of bit of detritus in the air and on surfaces, and then that will transfer to your thread, and then it will turn it gray like it's doing now. I mean, that's kind of okay because the lacing rings are silver colored, so it blends in. But if you were, say, going to be working on your white linen undergarments like I am, then you'll want to wash your hands so that you don't get finger oils all over the thread and on the area where you're working. That's why a lot of professional modern embroiderers actually wear gloves so that they don't stain up, gunk up the very fine, expensive threads on really fine embroideries. Yeah.
See the embroidery that we have on the divider.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for those who don't know, my condotier was actually supposed to join in this morning, but he got up too late for us to set up the work area so that it would work out. But he's actually working on a pouch over on the other side of this very not big room. Oh, great. Yeah. So he's working on, this is the back and flap, right?
Back and flap.
The back and the flap of the pouch we're going to be teaching a workshop on. This is the strap, will be the strap for the buckle. And then there'll be pieces put on the side here. And the strap will come in here to go on the belt. And there will be a slot for a dagger.
I meant to put that on first. Not the flap.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well.
Let's see, what else? I once again stumbled across more unknown extant medieval garments, which is always exciting to me. And this week, I promise I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the live stream where, I'm not going to be able to plan it because it's just going to have to happen organically when I'm in the middle of searching for something. I'm going to stream, and then you can see exactly. That is not what I meant to do. Okay, well, we're going with it. Then you can see exactly what my online research process is, because I find the most amazing things through the most random searches, and usually not the thing I'm looking for. So you can actually learn my process and see what it is I do to find all of the rare and esoteric information that I find. For example, extant garments that were excavated in 2019 in Spain, and that basically completely bypassed the majority of the 14th and 15th century living history community as far as I know. So I will literally share my screen, and you can come with me on my exploration adventure on whatever topic it is I happen to be looking into. And you can even help me pick and choose where I click and where I go. But this will hopefully be a way to help you, weaponize is the wrong word, but maximally leverage the internet and the various platforms and tools on the internet for the exploration of medieval and historical fashion and medieval material culture in general. Yesterday I was looking for pictures of extant urinals, medieval urinals, as a visual aid for the video I'm doing on medieval Irish clothing, 15th century Irish clothing specifically. I'm almost done with that. I just need to put in a few final details. Those videos, this is men's clothing in the Irish parts of Ireland in the 15th century, not the parts under severe English influence. And then I'm doing a separate video on Irish clothing in the parts of Ireland under English influence, and then I'm doing a separate video on women's clothing, both within the Pale and without the Pale. So the first one in the series, which will be the one on men's Irish clothing in Ireland, in the Irish parts of Ireland, will be coming out very shortly. I just need to add music and put in the please like and subscribe stuff. So yeah, but in my quest, in my research into 15th century men's clothing in Ireland, it took me on quite a wild ride, and I stumbled across quite a few resources that a lot of people are unaware of. Online digital resources, for instance, collections of manuscripts, of Irish manuscripts that you can just look at completely in their entirety online for free. So I'm putting in a couple of half knots to secure the back end of my stitching. And then I'm going to bury my needle and bring it out and cut the thread somewhere else so that the end of the thread is buried inside, sandwiched securely between. Maybe I shouldn't have brought it out right next to the finger loop silk trim, but that's okay. Okay, so there we have it. Lacing ring attached. Honestly, I think that lacing rings don't necessarily, at least attaching these kind and in this kind of very scrupulous way, I honestly don't think that it takes less time than just making a lacing hole. But these are clearly much more decorative than just a lacing hole. So, yeah. Okay, now you can see the way these align. So just need to undo this lacing ring. There is something a little bit soul-stealing about having to undo your work and redo it rather than just doing new work or even repairing a hole. Research rabbit hole tour. Looking forward to it. Yeah, and I'm probably going to do this more often when I see that I'm going on one of my research rabbit hole tours. I'll just start a live stream. It's something I can't. It has to be natural. I don't want to plan. I don't want to give you an artificial research rabbit hole experience. I want to give you the real deal. A sort of day in the life of the Contessa and her explorations. So it's unfortunately I can never really plan what that's going to be. Also, unfortunately, for all of you in the Western Hemisphere, probably that's going to be when you're sleeping. Although if you're in Europe, Africa time zones, Middle East a little bit, you might actually be awake because I do most of that kind of work in the middle of the day. Although I sometimes do it in the evening, my time. Morning is usually when I focus on, when I first get up, I do get a bunch of video editing in, then I go to the gym, then I come back, work on more video editing, take a break from video editing, work on sewing, and usually it's in the video editing process where I end up doing a lot of research. So, oh, look at all those beautiful silk stitches I have to undo. Yeah, research rabbit holes are awesome, but also very distracting. I feel like a squirrel when I'm wandering the internet in search of information because, God, if there's I know many of you have heard this before, you'll hear it again. If the kind of information that is available now on the internet had been available when I started this journey 30 years ago, I can't even imagine where I'd be now. Because getting started, when I started, local libraries had a couple, maybe if you're lucky, like one or two erroneous Victorian books on medieval fashion. Primary sources, please. If you didn't live near a university that had a manuscript collection, you weren't getting it done. And now, and even so many extant garments have even been discovered in the meanwhile and published, and all this information that's now available that you can just I find right here in my office, which is just right there behind us, my elliptical cross trainer with my computer. So much I can find without ever even setting foot beyond my door. Yeah, it's currently 2:40 here. I should go to sleep, but this is also interesting. Well, Eric, I really appreciate you tuning in despite it being 2:40 in the morning your time. Yeah, I know. It is really hard living in Asia to find a time zone that works for everyone. I have real insomnia issues, so starting things really early is bad for me, for my sleep, because I usually need a couple of extra hours of sleep on the back end. And then by the time nighttime comes around, I am toast. So I don't have the energy, at 10 or 11 o'clock my time to be doing this live streaming and engaging and sewing and whatnot, because I'm pretty toasty. And that would honestly probably be the best time for like all the time zones. But yeah. Yeah. I wish I slept better. This would make it easier. I'm willing to research sleep time for a research rabbit hole tour. A research rabbit hole tour might actually be able to happen later. It's less performative than this kind of live stream is. So it takes a little bit less energy. I know it's difficult. Time zones. I'm a night owl and do some of my best work at night. Yep, I'm not. I'm a sunlight person. I can literally feel my energy. I mean, I can actually feel my energy levels drop as the sun goes down, and I can feel my energy levels rising as the sun rises. I'm very tied to the sun. Yeah, so Eric actually makes a comment, when we sleep in two parts, it's more easy. Yeah, so most people don't know that until in the industrial era, humans actually seem to have slept in, there were two sleeps, is what it's referred to in medieval sources, and maybe even in ancient Roman sources, although I don't know. So people used to sleep in two separate sessions, which is why that the 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, right? Yeah, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. That poem talks about a midwinter's nap because that was sleep number one. And then he woke up at the end of sleep number one to catch St. Nicholas, before returning to sleep number two. So people actually used to get up, used to go to bed at sunset, whenever that was, sleep for several hours, 3 or 4, maybe even 5 or 6, and they'd get up. They would do things. They would actually, they would either talk, or if they could afford candles or rushlights or oil lamps, they would actually light lamps and get some things done that were feasible in those kind of low light conditions. And maybe, depending on the time of year, maybe play some games, and then they'd go back to bed. So yeah, biphasic sleep, exactly. And that actually seems to be kind of a natural thing. I know, God knows, I wake up usually after 4 or 5 hours, and I'm fighting it, and I really shouldn't fight it. I really should just get up, do the things, and then go back to sleep, because that seems to be what my body's really working hard to force on me. Yet more evidence that I apparently am a resurrected medieval person. Or reincarnated, not resurrected. Reincarnated. I'm not a zombie. I'm not resurrected, reincarnated. Yeah, so biphasic sleep seems to be what we are more naturally designed to do. And we are maybe not doing ourselves as a species any favor by trying to force a quote unquote solid 8 hours. Okay. All of the dead thread tissue removed. Now to the application of the lacing ring. So for those who don't know, these lacing rings are replicas by Billy and Charlie's Finest Quality Pewter Wares. And I always get the name of their establishment just a little wrong. But if you look up Billy and Charlie Pewter Wares, it'll bring you to their website, which is amazing, by the way. Very affordable, very accurate reproductions of original archaeological pieces. And they do all kinds of belt fittings. In fact, I've got a belt here that they made in its entirety. Right, so this is a belt by them, made using pieces. Put it here, nice little purse hanger, right? So if you go to Billy and Charlie's, they are not a channel sponsor, by the way. Actually, Armor and Castings is. They also have amazing castings. So Billy and Charlie do pewter, Armor and Castings does bronze, silver, and gold. So yeah, you can you go to their website, you can get lots of amazing things, including all the fittings like this for a blingy belt, and including these lacing rings. Armor and Castings does not have lacing rings like these. They've got bigger, much, much, much bigger ones. So yeah, Billy and Charlie's. These are replicas of original finds, I think even from the Thames. But what's interesting is, even though the finds are from the Thames, these rings you also see them in portraits of women from 15th century, second half of 15th century Italy. And not just Florence, like in Venice, so some of Crivelli's, in Bologna. So yeah, it's interesting that they found these kinds of rings, like a whole bunch of them actually, in the Thames mud, but yet you see them in 15th century Italian artwork. And I think that really goes to show just how very interconnected the 15th century world was. People underestimate things like especially mercantile ties, because it wasn't just a question of a lone merchant, getting on a boat, heading through the gates of Hercules and, heading on up through the Bay of Biscay and dropping in at London. No, no, no. There were entire branches, merchant companies set up branches all across Europe. So, you had Italian merchants setting up businesses, branch offices in Lisboa, in Paris, in Bruges, in London, in Dublin. So, the medieval world was a lot more interconnected than people want to believe it was. And in some people want to believe it was. There's this weird movement for isolationism in the interpretation of medieval European culture that just isn't borne out by the actual evidence. Oh, I guess I should put a proper knot in the end and not just a knot in one of the two tails. So it wouldn't surprise me if, if these rings got imported into London and, God knows how they may have ended up in the Thames en masse. Maybe a ship sank, maybe a box of cargo ended up accidentally getting dropped into the Thames. Who knows? But here we are. Yeah, Joshua comments on the biphasic sleep thing. Neighbors would visit each other before the second sleep. Exactly. Yeah, neighbors would actually get together and converse and, like I said, play games, actually get something done. It's an interesting thought, reapproaching biphasic sleep. Unfortunately, it's kind of at odds with the way we've set up the modern working world, mostly around post-industrial lifestyles based on factory schedules and whatnot. Okay, all anchored. Placing. I feel like this is the learning channel and I'm doing surgery here. I'm placing the ring and then I will go ahead and bring this needle up for anchor stitches. Let's see. What else have I discovered this week? Oh yeah, so one of the new to me extant garments I found. I have to chase it down a little bit more, but it is a pair of 14th century linen braids, and it still has the belt attached actually. And I wanted to chase that down a little bit more to get some more details on the seams and construction methods used. One of my Pinterest finds. Pinterest is a dangerous place, by the way. And like any tool, you have to know how to use Pinterest properly. So it was on someone's Pinterest board, and it was with a whole bunch of other medieval extant garments I've never seen before either. And that says something because I've seen a lot of medieval extant garments. So I really need to go and chase that Pinterest board down. But I was in the midst of putting together my video on 15th century Irish fashion, and I was so good. I exerted real willpower. I forced myself to focus on the video and not wander down that rabbit hole. So yeah, but now I've got to chase it up. Maybe I'll save that. I'll do that as the medieval research rabbit hole with the Contessa. We'll chase up those extant garments because I think if you're watching this, probably you're interested in medieval extant garments, and so that might be interesting for you. Benefit of doing these research rabbit holes with me is that I am originally a professional linguist by trade. So I speak, read, and write like fluently 5 languages and enough to get by another couple of other languages, most of them European. So that means when it's, even if it's in another language, it doesn't bother me or faze me. And I can actually do searches in other languages actively, which can be really useful because a lot of web pages, you aren't going to pull them up with an English search. Although that's changing now that they're implementing more AI translation tools. Yet another reason I no longer have a job as a translator. Okay, or a career at all as a translator. Yeah, okay, that's correct. Okay, and now we will commence with the buttonhole stitch around the rings. The little rings on the lacing ring. Sorry, it's not actually on camera. Why is this? I'm very much a right-handed sewer. What languages dost thou speak? I speak French, German, Spanish, and Italian. My Italian's a little rusty because I haven't used it. I haven't spoken it in a while. My reading is no problem, but I haven't spoken Italian actively in a while. Um, I can speak Korean. I can speak, read, and write Korean. I can speak it like a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. Working on that. I can understand I can understand reading anyway most of the Scandinavian languages because of my most Finnish is not among them. So the Germanic Scandinavian languages. Um, and I can also get by in Dutch reading, not spoken. I've took a semester of Mandarin. I took a semester of standard Arabic. Yeah, languages are fun. Yeah, dost thou. That's okay. Early forms of English are challenging. Yeah. So the second person informal in English was thou, thou art. Um, that was that used to be the English equivalent of du in German or tu in French, tu in Spanish, tu in Italian. But that it fell out of use in the 17th century, basically. But that was the informal you. Thou dost, thou art. To be is always an irregular verb. In all languages, to be the verb to be is an irregular verb. I've never not in not a single language. Ida, Ida. Yeah, in not a single language is that I've studied is the verb to be a regular verb. Yep, exactly. Yeah, you can you if you want you can go ahead and type in Dutch and I can mostly understand it. If you fall into some kind of hard slang, probably not so much. But what you just wrote there, totally, I can understand that. Nederdutsche or Lower German, Nederdutsche. Yeah, Low German is fun. All those German dialects are fun. You really see them. The dialects really crop up really hard if you do research in medieval German on medieval German culture because of course German used to be a lot more localized than it is now. Yeah, much more a lot more color, a lot more variety. Okay, moving on to the other side. So again, just like with the other lacing ring, I'm going to really work on burying the thread as much as possible because I really want to minimize the wear and tear that goes on the thread courtesy of my hyperactive lifestyle. It looks like a lowland Lumbee language. Fun. Yeah. Languages are fun. I know not everyone thinks so, but I've always had a gift for languages, so they've always been fun to me. My favorite classes were always the language classes. Well, and history, if I had a good teacher. Unfortunately, history is not taught correctly, at least not in the United States. I can't speak for how it's taught in other countries because I haven't actually taken history classes in other countries. Because that's not true. No, that's not true. I had history classes when I studied in Spain and France, and at university anyway, the classes were taught correctly. I'm talking more at like the high school level. Instead of focusing on the why and the influences and the interconnections and the story part of history, so many history classes just focus on dates and battles. Great man history, right? And that's boring for most people. And that's why most people aren't interested in the history. They never, for a long time, historians downplayed the importance of the average person, the everyday man of daily life in history. But really, as I forget who was it who said it, but politics is local and history is local. So, we didn't learn, well, how did people in Toulouse feel about Napoleon coming back from the dead, from exile, and kicking it all back off again, right? You know, we don't hear the they didn't teach about the voices, the writings of your common people to give you an idea of what daily life was like, but really that's what's most engaging. And daily life is the thing that makes those battles possible, that informs those battles, that informs those great dates of history. Oh yeah, history classes in America have gotten worse since they took away textbooks. Wait, what? They they took away textbooks? Oh my God. Okay, well, isn't that fun? If you're watching and enjoying, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up. I hate that I have to say that, but welcome to the world, the ecosystem in which I operate. Okay, so I ran out of thread after this first loop, so I'm just going to go ahead and do this other loop with this new bit of thread. So I'm just going to anchor again. Oh, I didn't. Oh, well. I'll actually apply the wax this time. So wax, why do we apply wax? Wax serves two multiple functions. One, it strengthens your thread. It makes it more resistant to fraying and as it goes up and down through the fabric. It also prevents it from knotting on itself. It makes that a much less likely outcome. And you know, with a sewing machine, you don't need to wax your thread because the thread only goes through once, really. I mean, it goes through the, you know, the various cogs and whatnot that guide the thread, but it only goes through the fabric once. Whereas when you're sewing with a needle and thread and you go up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down, the whole length of thread gets dragged through again and again and again. So there's a lot more wear and tear on your thread than there is from machine sewing, which means that, you know, it's very important. Oops, sorry. It's very important that you wax your thread to make it stronger and able to better withstand the ardor, the vicissitudes, the abuses of the sewing process. I'm glad you answered the question about waxing thread. I just got the same question as you answered it. And Joshua, we are just in tune tonight. My goodness. Let's see, what else do I have coming up? I have some gigs coming up. I'll be traveling to the US a couple of different times in the coming year. In March, I'll be going back for two different things. I'll be leading and teaching dance and being the Contessa in general at an immersive 14th, 15th century event out in Oklahoma, where there will be harness fighting and we'll be dancing and making merry and just pretending, having a beautiful 15th century courtly idyll. And then I've been also hired to go and teach at an SCA Kingdom University in Alberta and Edmonton in May. So I'm very excited to go and share my passion and knowledge and skills with everyone there. And then I'll be coming back in August for Penzic, big 2-week medievalist fair in Western Pennsylvania. I'll be living my 15th century medieval lifestyle. You can check out my Penzic playlist if you want to see what that's like. You can also see the kind of 15th century glamping setup I have there. And I'll be teaching lots of dance and leading evening dancing and balls and doing sort of immersive 15th century medieval courtly life in my glamping setup. So I'll be doing lots of live streaming from that event. So anyone who isn't able to attend can join in and experience it somewhat firsthand. And then I have also been hired to teach, to lead dance, teach and lead dance at the first ever War of the Roses convention in the United States that will be next February in Baltimore. So if you are interested in attending a convention with experts on 15th century culture and history, tailoring, material culture, you know, actual professors lecturing about the War of the Roses and dance in my case, then you should check that convention out. Tickets are now on sale. So yeah, and then I've also been hired to lead dance at a new Renaissance fair that's being launched in Selma. Yes, that's Selma, historical Selma, in March as well. So that's part of my business trip back to the US. So yeah, I've got a bunch of things on the plate, as it were, in addition to my projects and my content creation. Let's see. They took away textbooks in schools and closed my nephew's school library. He's in the 8th grade. Oh, that's great. That's fantastic, because that's never been a bad sign historically when you take away books and close libraries. Jesus. You know, when I was in school, I lived in the library when I could. I loved just walking the stacks and seeing what books caught my attention and just grabbing a book and sitting in the aisle and just reading whatever it was. And it was peaceful and it was quiet and there was so much information and knowledge. I loved the library. Absolutely loved it. But I do remember when I was in elementary school, the school where I went to needed more space for classes. And so we used to have this big library. And instead, they turned the big library into a bunch of classrooms and they downsized it to be like a fifth the size in this way smaller space. At the time, I didn't understand what that, could signify. But now in retrospect, that was sad, actually. Because I mean, the library we had before that was huge and was full of books. And the new one was tiny and full of books, but obviously way fewer books. I'm always looking for old books there. Yeah, libraries, man, they are, and university too. I would just walk this. I go to my university library on University of Delaware is my alma mater, and I would just wander the stacks and see what goodness I found. And that's why when I went to Europe, when I went to university in Europe, I went to the University of Heidelberg, and you can't wander the stacks. They don't let you wander the stacks at the university library. This gorgeous Art Nouveau library that was built by one of the last dukes, one of the last Wittelsbacher. They don't let you, they didn't used to, and maybe they do now. They didn't 20 years ago. You had to look up the book you want, hand the information to the librarian, and they would go and fetch the book for you. And that is not fun, ladies and gentlemen. There is no fun or joy in that. There's no creative exploration in looking in a card catalog or an electronic card catalog and handing someone a number and having them bring that back to you. That's terrible. I love libraries. I would live there in the history section if I could. Yeah, but you know what? See, that's why I like wandering the stacks, because not as I found out when we've been cataloging our own library, different books can qualify as different things under the Dewey Decimal System. So for instance, a book could be a book on history, or it could be a book on fashion, or it might be qualified as a book on social studies, or it might be qualified as a book on criminal justice, but it's all the same book. But depending on how you qualify it, it might put it into different spots. So if you only go to the history section, you're going to miss out on a whole lot of books. For example, history of dance books are not in the history section. They're in the performing arts section. So literally at my university library, we had these amazing, what back then was brand new, just this research by this Dr. Smith was his name, and he published all these transcriptions of 15th century Italian dance manuscripts in one compendium, 2 volumes. It doesn't go in the history section, it goes in the performing arts section. And I would never have known or thought to look up those books because I didn't even know that was an option in books, but wandering the stacks allowed me to find them. So, yeah. Books about esotericism or the occult are hard to come by. Are they? Really? I don't know. Interesting. Okay, well, we have the lacing rings have been attached. There we go. And yep, that'll look great. So when this laces shut, when it laces shut, it's supposed to have a V in it like this. So it isn't supposed to lace shut. The V has been built into it to create that lovely, alluring V where you can see puffs of white coming through. And speaking of puffs of white, let's move on to the repairs on our linen garments. Yay. Just going to stop and have a little bit of tea. You never found them in the wild. Interesting. I'm pretty certain my university library had books on at least on occultism, or on the occult for certain. University of Delaware. Now, granted, that was 20 years ago. Where the hell is the time gone? But Delaware is a pretty liberal state and very much believes in books. So I doubt that that's changed. Hey, Chimi, hey, bad kitty. No, gosh, sorry, guy. No, get down off of the project table. He's chewing on artificial sinew. Bad kitty. He wants me to give him dry food, and I'm not going to do that. He needs to eat his wet food. I refuse to give in to feline terrorism. What time period are these clothes based? 15th century. So what you see me wearing today, ladies and gentlemen, this is I'm only wearing 2 layers. I'm wearing what I call my house clothes, my 15th century house clothes. This is my casual. I'm in my private chambers, and you all are just kind of like my courtiers with me sewing in my private chambers, or entertaining ourselves in my private chambers. So this is 15th century Franco-Burgundian, basically. This kind of coif. It's very much a casual wear sort of thing. And I've got my linen smock on and my front lacing kirtle, which would have been dyed with woad if it had been hand dyed. This one was not. This is commercial fabric. So yeah, this is very much 15th century Franco-Burgundian. And I'm working now. This is a 15th century Italian men's shirt. So it's got the collar built in, so that the raised collar, so that this protects his farsetto from the evils of his skin. And it has a couple of little repairs. This was a bit of an experiment. I know what I need to do differently next time. I need to make the collar start actually much closer. Like the seam actually needs to go further up than this. It's actually too wide. So, but that's why there is a gore in the front. Right there, you can see the gore insert into the collar so that it would fit over his head, even if it's closer to his neck. Yeah. No. 15th century women are not modestly covered in public. Women, they're the older women were. I mean, like matrons, women who've retired to a convent. But no, low necklines are very fashionable in most of Europe in the 15th century, depending on where you are. And actually, the further east you go, when you get into Eastern Germany and Bohemia, you definitely get more cleavage. Yep. Nope. Getting into this is getting into the period where clothes are designed to uplift and sort of show. I don't know. That's a weird myth. That's a weird misconception. I've heard that a couple of times now, that people in the Middle Ages wore dresses up to their necks, and it's just not true. Depends on the period. The Middle Ages is literally 1,000 years, right? So it's not going to be the same clothes across that entire period. In the earlier Middle Ages, absolutely, garments all seem to go up to the neck through most of Europe, with some exceptions there. But by the 15th century, you're getting a lot of low necklines. You're getting, and this is not even a very low neckline. Like there is no danger of any actual exposure here. I've just got a long torso, and this is my chest. But yeah. Very, very much, this is the apple breast era, when dresses are especially designed to position the breasts in this kind of literal, like 2 little apples on your chest. And if you look in illuminations from this, if you look in miniatures from this period, you're going to see, if you look closely, you'll actually see the artist, all male, by the way, specifically included the rounded tops of the breasts that are poking up above the neckline. Yeah. Yeah, so this is the 15th century, certainly in the 13th, 12th, 11th, and 10th century in most of Western Europe, or all of Western Europe. The necklines are definitely high on men too, by the way, everyone. But that shifts starting in the second half of the 14th century. Necklines start opening up for women, and the shoulders get wider and wider until you end up with an off-the-shoulder look. in many cases. And then in the 15th century, the shoulders come back a little bit, but you still have a deep neckline. But then by the end of the 15th century, especially in places like Venice, you end up going off the shoulder again. And in certain parts of Germany, Saxony, you end up going off the shoulder again. Yeah. Uh, yeah, historically, before the 19th century, all clothes were made by hand. And yeah, it takes a long time. Just this shirt alone, it's not even big, right? It's not really that big. Sorry, I blocked the light and that messed with the thing. This shirt probably took 20 hours, I would say, start to finish, if not longer. But and it doesn't have that many seams, but laying it out and cutting it and then doing all the stitches, yeah, it takes time. So this has developed a little hole here at the neck. And actually, I did not bring. Oh, I do. I have a little potentially have a patch right here. I may just go ahead and patch that baby up with this. This was actually a demonstration button I did on how to make cloth stuff buttons for the 15th century Irish clothing video. But the only thread I could find that was visible was my really good black silk embroidery thread here. And I didn't want to waste that really good, expensive silk embroidery thread on a demonstration button. So I actually literally picked the button apart and was able to salvage all of the thread and return it to the spool for future use. So medieval sustainability for the win. I love it when I can save materials that way. But that means that I've got just this tiny little piece of linen. And I think I might just go ahead and use that as a patch here. So, So yeah, now we get into the white garments. I actually have a bunch of garments here that need repairs. All my garments, I mean, they always end up needing repairs. I'm pretty certain that's about as authentic as it can get, though. See, the other thing I can tell by this hole, I mean, there's so many things I would do differently next time making this. This was an experiment, this shirt, on this creating this built-in higher raised collar. But you can tell there's been strain that's been put on that juncture. That's where the shoulder meets the neck, the collar. So that would be here, basically. And you can tell that there's a lot of strain has been put there. So I'm actually not going to like whip stitch this shut. I'm actually going to put in this patch and let it fill in that gap, because that gap has naturally formed because that's kind of what the fabric wants to do. So I'm going to leave that hole there and I'm going to pin it in place. And then I'm going to do some whip stitches, whip stitch the edges, the raw edges down to the linen patch. And then I will also whip stitch the edges of the patch on the back side, whip stitch that closed. But the first thing I'm going to do is pin this and then probably put in some anchoring stitches to hold it in place. Okay. Good. I mean, I'm not super angry with, that this just, so you can see a second hole is forming on the other side as well. I'm not angry at all because I made this 12 years ago. What year is it? 12 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. I made this 12 years ago. And, it's held up pretty well. Gosh knows the quality of the linen was really good back then. Look at this linen. There's hardly any wear through. That's pretty good quality linen. Hard to find that these days, isn't it? What style of shirt is that? Okay. You lock your clothes away from the felines. Oh yeah. Yeah, I definitely lock my clothes away from the cats. We have to. Okay, so this is the 15th century Italian style shirt. And you can start seeing evidence of this raised collar in at least by the 1440s, if you look at the portraiture, and maybe earlier. So if you look, there's a great painting by, crap, his name just flew out of my head. Famous 1490s Venetian painter. And he painted this great scene taking place in the Grand Canal in Florence. And there's all these people lined, or the Rialto, maybe it's the Rialto. There's all of these people lined up for this. It's a parade, it's a float. and I forget, I think it's one of Venice's triumph days. And you can actually see laundry poles, not lines, laundry poles that have been suspended out of windows in the palazzi like flagpoles, but instead of flags, they have laundry drying on them. And you can see shirts that have actually been laid over the poles like this in half, and you can see this collar hanging down that makes it look like there's an insert, a gore, and that there's the upright part of the collar as well. So yeah, this is a sort of conjectural 15th century Italian style shirt. And the benefit of it, as I mentioned, is that you've got this raised collar that goes around your neck and protects the collar of your farsetto, the finer fabric of your farsetto, from the evils of your skin. So that's the kind of shirt this is. It's based on some visual evidence. It's based on, if you look at the portraits of men wearing, like the proper portraits of men in their farsetti, and, usually it's a bust portrait. If you look around the collar, the collar of their farsetto, you'll see this white linen fabric that's kind of bunched up under the collar. And my theory is that it's this collared kind of shirt. And I'm not the only, other people have thought that as well. I'm not alone in that. For those of you just joining, welcome. This is a chat, so absolutely please do feel free to chime in. I'm going to actually anchor this on the backside. Please do feel free to chime in with questions or comments. Let us know what you're working on, if you're actually working on a project of any kind, whether it's sewing or calligraphy and illumination, knitting, crochet, weaving, whatever. I am currently working on patching a hole in the collar of a 15th century Italian shirt. I have just anchored the thread in the back. And now I'm going to whip stitch. Oh, okay. So guess what I didn't do? I get so involved talking to you all, and then I forget things. Okay, so I did not wax this thread, and you will notice that this thread is already trying to knot on itself. So I'm going to coax it out, use a technique that will force it to not knot on itself like that, and then we're going to wax the thread. Now, the good thing about wax, it will come out in the wash, so you don't have to worry about, oh, well, there'll be wax on my garments. It will, if any wax ends up on the fabric that you're sewing, it will come out in the laundry. And goodness knows that white linen garments were laundered to hell and back. Yeah, see how it keeps trying to knot on itself. Okay, wax time. So, there were professional laundresses for a reason, because doing laundry was a real art. And, they would literally have laundry greens in villages that were just greens of grass where laundresses would lay out garments for bleaching and drying, because, as I learned relatively recently, this is why I love exploring. There's always new things to learn. I learned relatively recently that one of the byproducts of photosynthesis is oxygen. It's a peroxide, but it's the oxygen is what's important here. And that byproduct of oxygen, of photosynthesis, of respiration, plant respiration, helps bleach linen garments. So in combination with the sun, the oxygen being released by the green grass helps bleach garments and turn them white again. So linen garments were washed in very hot water. They were, bleached in urine, in fermented urine, which is, basically ammonia, sometimes in lemon juice if it was bad enough. And then they would lay them on grassy greens and also on bushes. That's why you also sometimes see, if you look at pictures of laundresses, you'll see they've hung their white garments on shrubbery, because shrubs also, excrete, exhaust is not the word I'm looking for. Exhale oxygen, although that's really not quite the right word either, but they put off oxygen as a byproduct of photosynthesis. So yeah, just so what that means is you can absolutely wash your linen garments. Some tips about washing linen. One, linen is stronger. Linen fibers are stronger when they're wet. Any cellulose. Cellulose fibers are stronger when they're wet. Why do I tell you this? So if you are going, and I machine wash all my linen stuff. I mean, maybe you have time to hand wash all of your stuff. I don't have time to hand wash everything. So my recommendation is you put your linens and always wash like colors with like colors, especially with modern dye stuffs. A lot of modern dye stuffs are not color fast. So put your linens in the washing machine, turn it on, let it fill, and then stop it. And let your linen garments fully hydrate, fully soak up that water, because when they hydrate, the fibers are stronger. There will be less damage to your garment from the laundering process. You'll lose less fibers from being laundered, and your garments will last longer. Now, how long is full hydration? I honestly don't know. I let it soak for at least an hour, and sometimes I just forget about it and come back to it the next day. So I'm actually going to switch to a blanket edge stitch here. And that's going to it's going to do a better job of catching these sort of raw edges around this hole. I was talking about laundry and not really paying attention to what I was doing. It's okay, it's just a patch. And a part that will not be visible because he'll be wearing a farsetto. So yeah, all these little things I've learned over the years, just courtesy of medieval living history. These things you don't learn, God knows they don't even teach home economics anymore, because who needs to know how to cook or manage a house or do all the basic things? No, we don't need to know any of that. Yeah, secret oxygen. Yeah. Mhm. Let's see, what else? Today I have in the book collection, I have books in different languages, actually. But that's okay. I think that the books themselves are still interesting, even if you don't speak, read, or write the language in question. The pictures can be very useful, but also, sadly, following on to my comment that my career as a translator is dead thanks to machine translation and artificial intelligence. Part of that is that indeed Google Translate has gotten so good that even with esoteric books like history books on very unique arcane topics, you can use Google Translate and it will give you a pretty reasonable translation. So yeah. These books we're going to talk about when we get to the book corner part, even if it's in a language you don't understand, no problem, because Google Translate will probably give you a pretty good understanding. Comments. Yeah, plant fires take a while to be fully saturated. Dyed some cotton once, took days to get wet through. Yeah. Yeah, so that's exactly. I actually haven't looked up what the rate of hydration for linen is. I know it takes a while, which is why I'm okay when I forget it and come back to it the next day. Another comment, the tapestry behind you is lovely. Can you tell us about it? Yes, this is based on the original La Dame et la Licorne, which is in the Musée de Cluny in Paris. It is one part of what's called a chambre, which is a set of tapestries that were woven to fit a specific room, all in the same theme. So that's why a lot of extant medieval tapestries have weird shapes sometimes, like it's this weird size. Like, why is it that weird little square or that weirdly long rectangle? It's because tapestries were originally woven in suites, in groups. And then they were designed specifically, they were commissioned to fit a room and to cover the entire room, except for the apertures, like the fireplace, the window, and the door. So La Dame et la Licorne is indeed part of one of these suites of tapestries. The Lady and the Unicorn, you might know it as. An amazing, oh my God. I mean, to see it in person is, my heart starts accelerating just thinking about the times I've been to the Cluny and gotten to look at these in person. And the series It's part of a the senses. It's a series of 6 tapestries about the 5 senses and desire. And I forget the name of the nobleman who commissioned it, but his pull this. Oh yeah, you can see the corner here. His coat of arms is in all of them. I was joking to my condottiero the other day that this sort of rather obscure 15th century French nobleman, I think he was a count, might have been a duke, is has probably the most common heraldry in the entire world, because there are so many replicas of this tapestry series in everywhere, and they've turned them into scarves, and so his heraldry is just everywhere and no one even knows who he is. Yeah, but so this one behind me is the sense of hearing. That's why the lady is playing a portative organ. And this is a replica of that series. It's an older replica. There was a time 50, 60, 70 years ago where this company called Rambouillet was making these silk screened replicas. So it's actually a tapestry background made of wool and linen, but it's not woven. The pattern isn't woven. The pattern is silk screened on, but it's hand silk screened. So it's a pretty intensive process. And the one behind me is, I don't know, 6.5 feet by 4 feet, something like that. Yeah. How about interpreting cursive? It has become an art form and AI can't recognize it. Oh yeah, that's true. When I was little, oh, crap, this nodded on me anyway because I wasn't paying attention. When I was little, we learned cursive. First off, I taught myself cursive when I was 5 because I thought it was so beautiful. And I guess that really looks forward to my love of all things medieval and calligraphy. But then I was oppositional defiant and I hated my teachers telling me that I had to write in cursive. But now I'm really glad that they forced me to write in cursive because I have a pretty nice cursive hand. It's much nicer than my printed hand. But yeah, a lot of like my stepchildren can't read cursive handwriting for anything. They can barely write. They write like 5-year-olds and they're teenagers. It's kind of scary, actually. Forget cursive. Any kind of handwriting is dying. So it doesn't surprise me that AI is having issues with cursive writing. I bet AI is having issues with wonder how AI would do with manuscripts. Huh. Um, Lisa says, I saw the Lady in the Unicorn tapestries at the Cluny. I was surprised at how small they were. Yeah, yeah, and they're different sizes because they were designed to fit probably a study. So not a big room. The really giant tapestries don't really come about until the 16th and 17th century when you start getting these massive, massive halls as a consequence of the centralization of power to royal courts. So away from, ducal and county courts to this, there's this consolidation in 16th century Europe of power, of political power. And the creation of, nation states are sort of born in the 16th century. The modern nation state, as we would understand it, are sort of born. That's the start of them, really, is the 16th century. And so that's when you get these heads of state who have the power and the resources to build these massive palaces with these massive great halls that need tapestries to decorate them as part of the heating system. Yeah, they don't even teach, comment is they don't teach cursive at schools anymore. Yeah, a lot of schools don't, but now I've heard in a lot of places, in Germany, for instance, they're going back to it finally. So hopefully they'll go back to teaching cursive. Yeah, we'll see. But what's really funny is a lot of people because they didn't learn a cursive form, a lot of people just kind of naturally make their own cursive-ish form when they're writing quickly, right? They find their own way to connect letters. Unfortunately, if everyone connects letters in their own way, that means they're not necessarily mutually intelligible. So that's not necessarily great. Okay, once again, feeling sort of like I'm on the Learning Channel performing surgery. So I have cleaned up the edges and applied a blanket stitch / buttonhole stitch to make that nice and neat. And I think I'm just going to go over where I started and only had the whip stitches because it's not as nice and neat as the other part of the repair. Yeah, my condolences for the education system. Oh, the education system in America has been intentionally destroyed to create an electorate that is unable to think critically and unable to see what's actually happening. So Yeah, it's been part of a 50-year plan. It sucks. It's pretty awful to watch. Yeah, so the Lady and the Unicorn tapestries are very interesting because of the symbolism that's in them. People don't realize that there was a medieval language. We talked about this last week, and I'm sorry for those for whom this is repetitive. We talked about the fact that in the Middle Ages there was a language of flowers, and there was symbolism. If flowers were included in an artwork, there was symbolism, and there's a lot of flowers. This is Millefleurs, one of the earlier Millefleurs tapestries, thousand flowers, which means there's a lot of flowers. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a lot of kind. And I actually haven't taken the time to study what kind of flowers are in this series of tapestries, but I'm going to bet if I start digging, I'm going to find some real symbolism that was intentionally built into them. And each of the, it's these are allegorical. So the thing about the clothing that the women in these are wearing, you cannot use these tapestries for historical fashion, not for clothes that real people wore in daily life. Now, what you can use the clothing in these tapestries for is if you're making a costume in the 16th century or a costume in the 15th century, then this is what 15th and 16th century people thought of as costumes, as fancy dress, right? As something you would wear as part of a mask or a performance that's allegorical, that's not intended to represent what real people actually wore, but what performers would wear. So you could definitely, if you want to make a 15th century costume for a 15th century costume ball, for instance, then this is the Lady and the Unicorn are your babies, but they do not depict real clothes in real life or real hair or real anything. It's all about, showing to the viewer that this is allegorical in nature. In fact, that is one of my goals. I would like to make like one of these outfits specifically as a costume because I think medieval costumes are really fun. And it just so happens that I'm an expert in 15th and 16th century dance, so I can actually organize a 15th or 16th century costume ball that is actually, set in the 15th or 16th century. It's just some kind of theme, and I have done this, and it's a lot of fun. And then we all get to make costumes in medieval style costumes rather than what modern people think of as a costume. Because what I'm wearing now is not a costume. This is just 15th century clothing. Like I actually cringe when people call what I'm wearing a costume because it's not. This is just historical clothing. Okay, well, I've got it all nice and patched on the front there. Looks almost like it was some kind of intentional decorative element, which is nice. And now I'm just going to decide whether I'm going to turn these edges under or leave them exposed. And I'm going to turn them under because this gets laundered a lot. So it's a little more effort, but that's okay. It does get laundered a lot. There will be fraying. It's fine. Mhm. Yeah, it's I've gotten really good at patches over the years, especially on my stockings. Oh my goodness, my stockings are the most patched garment in the history of the world. Oh goodness. Yep. Yeah, they are. Yeah, and it's funny if you when you see extant, if the times we have extant garments. I really love it when an extant garment has patches in the same place I've had to put patches on my clothes. It makes me feel like I'm living a more authentic medieval lifestyle, especially for stockings. Extant stockings, hosen that they find, nearly always the feet are worn out. And or they've been patched. The feet have been patched a lot. But I have a massive tapestry collection thanks to COVID, which locked me down in Albuquerque, far, far away from any sort of medieval culture. And so I needed to I needed to surround myself with medieval things, and so we started just buying tapestries to cover our entire house, and which I talked about last week. But we have new people, so I thought I'd mention it. Most of them are in. It's a pin without its head. Most of them are in storage. Most of our things are in storage, but I think I have about 7 here scattered about the room, basically. That's a sweet sentiment. I like that. Humans the same in many ages. Yep, exactly. That is my thought. Well, thank you for that compliment. Oh, a selfer. I love you so much. Oh, thank you. I I hope I've done something to deserve such admiration. Welcome to the chat, by the way. Joshua says, my 15th century breeches have patches in the same areas extant breeches have patches. LOL. Yep. You are living an authentic medieval lifestyle, my friend. Congratulations. You know, it's interesting how often practitioners of living history in all ages of living history often try to come up with solutions for problems that didn't exist in the respective period. So I'll give you an example. A lot of modern people complain that they don't have that medieval clothes didn't have pockets. Okay, but why do we have pockets, right? What function does a pocket serve? Is it a function that existed in? Is it a function that existed in the Middle Ages? Oof, to turn this inside out to do this properly. I am about to create an unfortunate set of pleating that I'm not trying to do. You know, what function do pockets serve? Pockets serve to carry things. Did medieval people need to carry things? Yes, some things, but not as much as we carry around now. But for that, they had pouches. And in fact, that's why the word la poche used to mean pouch and has now become the French word for pocket, right? Because eventually pouches went from being an external thing to be built into your clothing. But you don't want, in garments that are fitted like this, you don't want a pocket in your clothes because that's going to show through your beautiful fitted silhouette, right? That's why you wear a belt like this, men and women, that has actually a purse hanger. This is a purse hanger, and a purse like this, which currently has thread in it, but it could just as easily be an ammonia, right? You have that's a nasty stain. You have a pouch like this, and it goes through your purse hanger, and that's your pocket, right? That's where you carry things, or you carry things straight on your belt. Like you can actually carry a knife on your belt. You know, you can carry a spoon in an etui, which is a molded leather case for a folding spoon that could actually strap on straight to your belt, right? But you know, there wasn't so much of a people didn't on a daily basis, you know, need to carry their entire lives with them everywhere they went. You know, they things were very local. You lived very, very close to where you shopped, for instance. So you didn't need to, you know, make sure you had all your supplies for the day, because if you needed something, you just go back home. Yeah, so we're often trying to come up with medieval solutions for a problem that didn't exist in the period in question. We talked about last week. We talked about leather shoes and leather soles and the slipperiness of medieval turn shoes, and how, you know, a lot of people are putting rubber soles on their medieval turn shoes or using as an excuse to wear sneakers when they do things like, you know, harness fighting. But the reality is that people didn't need to put grip on their soles. They just knew how to walk in them without slipping and falling because they walked differently. Right? Yeah. Comment. Yeah, it's not even a medieval life, it's just an authentic life. Yeah, 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 exactly. Um, my thought was pocket pouches were meant for things smaller than whatever you might need in a basket or cloth. Anytime you'd mean to carry something, you take a basket. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, good point. So if you're actually carrying like real things, like say purchases from the market or whatever, yeah, you'd carry a basket. But there's also a certain class of people who are going to be carrying baskets, and a certain class of people who aren't going to be carrying baskets. But absolutely, basketry, big thing in the Middle Ages, definitely a useful thing for carrying your bigger items around. But it's not, now, and especially women, God knows, they've got these duffel bag like purses that are bags of holding that I swear must have an entire surgical kit, and also, you know, roadside assistance flares, and like it's like the bag that has everything in it. Medieval, you didn't on your daily outings, medieval people wouldn't have taken that much with them. They would have gone out. If they were going to market and they were taking things to sell, they would have taken that to sell. Then you have baskets, but you wouldn't have taken that much of your personal belongings out with you. You wouldn't have taken touch-up cosmetics and a touch-up brush and, that sort of thing. Yeah. Comment. I actually dislike integrated pockets. I prefer external ones like this. It's funny. As a woman, I haven't often had internal pockets, integrated pockets. But I have a couple of dresses that do have built-in pockets, but they have full skirts. And I love the pockets, integrated pockets in the dresses with the full skirts. They're fantastic because they have, pretty full kind of like 1950s full skirts. They're great. I can't complain. I love keeping my ID card in it and my Metro card in my pocket. It's really, really handy for taking the Metro in Daegu and anywhere in the world, actually. Then I don't have to take my Metro card in and out of a wallet. It's just in my pocket. I feel like a big girl when I have pockets, but I don't need them in my medieval clothes because that's not my lifestyle when I'm wearing my medieval clothes. When I have my medieval clothes, then I put my Metro card in my pouch. And I actually have a separate little pouch that's just for cards, like credit cards and Metro cards. Yeah. I like both combined. Yeah, I think they have benefits, having an external and an internal pocket, so to say. I love mundane applications for these kinds of things. Yeah, it's a lot of, yeah, I do too. I love finding uses. I don't believe, if I don't have to, in what I call single use items, and I don't mean that in the usual way. I mean, I don't believe in having medieval reenactor goods, like replica items, and not using them. So we have replica medieval candlesticks, the kind that actually, sorry, there's somewhere and I can't go find them right now. The kind that actually completely collapse down into like a stick of metal, basically, from Todd Cutler's workshop. And we use them as candlesticks. If we want to light candles in the home, we use them. We don't just have them in a separate box somewhere and then bring out modern candlesticks when we want to use candles. No, we use our medieval ones because I have them. Why would I have two sets? I have on the counter over there my Mary Rose replica pepper grinder, which triggered some people to unsubscribe from my channel when I suggested that was a must-have for a modern medievalist because 1540 doesn't count as medieval enough to them. And so I was being dishonest by calling it that. Anyway, I have my Mary Rose replica pepper grinder. The Mary Rose sank in like 1547, and aboard it were these amazing preserved objects from daily Tudor life. Among them was a gorgeous turned wood pepper grinder, pepper mill, hand pepper mill. And I use that in my kitchen every single day to grind my pepper nice and fresh to put on my food. I don't have a separate pepper grinder. I don't have a plastic one. I use my medieval one. Why would I have two of them if I don't need it? So along those lines, I actually have a video series called Must-Haves for the Modern Medievalist. And it talks about the reenactment goods that I have for my medieval and my modern life and how you can use them in both. So if you are interested, it talks about the history behind each of the object, the originals on which they're based. So it's a, kind of well-rounded set of videos. Oh, I don't have I don't ask me about this. I keep those in my car. Casually, Farrell, what is it you keep in your car? Sorry, the whole bunch of comments just came in. Some of those modern wit women persons I call body bags. Yeah, they're pretty big. What kind of sewing pins do you use? These are not replica pins. I don't have enough money to have replica pins made. These are steel. These are just super thin steel sewing pins. I only use steel because I don't like plastic. I try to avoid plastic as much as possible. And I bought these ones actually in Florence a year and a half ago. I had literally lost my last pin. I had no pins left, nowhere, not anywhere in my house and not with me. I'd lost the last pin while out and about in Florence and working on some sewing projects. And so we went to an embroidery shop there in Florence. Fantastic place, by the way. We went to this embroidery shop and they had this giant box of these fantastic thin stainless steel pins. I love these things. They're sturdy, they're strong, but they're thin, they're pointy. Love them. Really good quality. I think they were made in Germany. Yeah. Yeah, the 16th century was a transitional period between the Middle Ages and the early modern era. Yeah, I agree. And also, the term Middle Ages is, especially for the algorithm, is a much will trigger the algorithm a lot more than Renaissance or early modern will. And that's the world in which I must function. But also, depending on what you consider to be medieval, early 16th century England may or may not be any or more or less medieval than the 15th century. Let's see. Oh, Casually says, I have a first aid and surgical kit and a road flare. I have a small kit with a tourniquet and emergency sutures. I hope to never have to use them, but I live kind of rural, so I may be tempted. So I may be a temp ambulance. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, but you keep them in your car. You don't keep them in a purse that you carry around with you. I was joking about that, by the way. It's just that some of these purses that I see my fellow women carrying these days literally would qualify as a carry-on or maybe even a checked bag on certain airlines. Yeah. Um, it's almost the witching hour in my patch of the world, so I'll say my greetings and return to the realm of sleep. Well, thank you. Thank you, Eric, for joining. And I really hope to see you again at a future live stream. Appreciate you staying up for this. Sleep well. It was very funny that I have exactly the things that you mentioned. Yeah. There's been a lot of weird connecting between me and you all out there tonight. Joshua and what he's teaching his brother is what I happen to be talking about at the time. And yeah, me guessing what might be in your emergency kit in your car. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So this is silk thread, just so you all know. That's why it's so shiny. This is Korean silk embroidery thread, actually, for the really fine Korean embroidery, but it's really fine, so I use it as sewing silk. Because I do have a whole bunch of white silk thread somewhere, but because we're kind of living in temporary accommodations and half of my stuff is in storage and half of it is in boxes somewhere else, I don't really know where my other white thread is. So I went down to Salmon Market, which is a, traditional style market here in Daegu, and went to the sewing supplies quarter of the market and found a vendor selling silk thread and bought it, even though it is indeed a very fine silk and would make really gorgeous embroidery. I mean, you can see the sheen. Just imagine that as the embroidery on like a patch that you would put on your sleeve. Oh, it would be gorgeous. But here I am, like using it for patchwork. Oh, goodness. Us users of big bags prefer to have things and not need them than not have them and need them. I mean, absolutely. I mean, so I've got a satchel. Really, I do. Um, I'm right there with you. Of course, in my satchel, I have a sewing project at all times, so that when I'm out and about, if I'm sitting or waiting for something, or I'm on the train or in a taxi or whatever, I can work on my sewing project. It sounded like a criticism, and it really wasn't. But my point is that we as that that when people do medieval living history, they often try to live the same way in their medieval living history time as they do in the modern world. And then they try to find solutions that are medieval, but that's for a modern situation. And then they find they can't, was my point. And I'm sorry if that came across critical. I didn't mean it to, really. So, yeah. Oh, thank you. I try to be adorable. Adorable is the goal. Well, adorable and passionate and knowledgeable and skilled and all that. But yeah, there's no reason not to be adorable while being all of those other things. Yeah. So let's see. Leslie says, I feel seen. I always have my purple bag full of sewing project everywhere I go. Yeah, absolutely. The insanity continues. Welcome. to the channel is I don't think I've seen you on my channel before, at least not as the insanity continues. Are you new here? If so, welcome. And welcome to everyone who may just be joining us or have just joined us recently. Please do feel free to jump in with questions or comments in the live chat at any time. You can ask me about what I'm doing. You can ask me about medieval fashion, about medieval cooking, medieval dance, medieval material culture in general. I kind of run the gamut on all of those subjects. And yeah, as Selfed, I definitely didn't mean to criticize you for your big bag. I mean, it's gotten to the point where I feel naked unless I have all the supplies I could possibly need in case I feel stranded. But I've just noticed it's been like an upward trend over the years of going from um, you know carrying a purse that's basically just your wallet and then now we've got these duffel bags that are certainly more practical in terms of what you can put in them. I mean, the other advantage of carrying a big bag around in the modern world especially is it means that if you go shopping, you can just put your purchases in your big bag if it's not already full, and then you don't have to either get a plastic bag that is not environmentally sustainable or buy a bag if you're in a place where you have to buy bags if you didn't bring your own. I certainly have absolutely used my bigger satchel to also carry home my grocery store purchases. Yeah. Which part of your ensemble gives you the most joy to put on? That's an interesting question. There is something really satisfying about lacing up a gown. I don't know what it is. It's just such an enjoyable part of the process. So I guess that would make it the kirtle, because of the lacing process. Yeah, there's okay. Is everyone there? So for those of you who weren't here at the beginning, I mentioned that we've had some serious internet issues lately. So if the stream pauses, don't go away. It should come right back. They've been doing construction work on the street outside of our apartment, and I'm pretty certain they hit something they shouldn't have. So we've had some issues all week with the internet. So if the stream drops, just give it a few seconds, maybe a minute, it will come back. Wow. Let me see. Let me see if I can what I can do about that. Okay, gone. Um, okay, I too usually have a project in my bag. My biggest project focus right now, though, is mending our unmentionables, which I just can't mend in public. Really? Am I the only one who has no problem mending my unmentionables in public? Wow, I guess I have no shame. No, I totally understand. Maybe I shouldn't be breaking out my braids and repairing them in public. Hold on a minute. I might have missed some questions. Just checking. Okay. Do I have a source for 1540s Bavarian women's clothing? Oh, yeah. Uh, if you're talking, yeah, there's a whole lot of, I mean, when you say, okay, Lisa, when you say, do I have sources? What do you mean by sources? Because there are 1540s. There are the Germanisches Museum in Nuremberg, I think, has some extant garments from that period, actually. But there are a lot of woodcuts from the 1540s, from Bavaria. So you can actually, there's a pretty good visual record of what Bavarians are wearing. And you said women's clothing? Women's clothing? Do you have a source for 1540? Yeah, women's clothing. Yeah. So there's actually some really good sources for 1540s men's Bavarian clothing, because there was a nobleman who actually kept a detailed fashion journal of his clothing. He was so proud of his clothes that he actually kept a fashion journal of all the ensembles he had made each year for his entire life, his entire adult life, which is crazy, but there it is. So yeah, for 1540s women's garments, there are a lot of woodcuts from that era that show a lot of fashion details. In terms of extant garments, there, like I said, I think there are some in the Germanisches Museum in Nuremberg, or wait, I'm trying to remember if the Germanisches Museum is in Munich or Nuremberg. Anyway, the museum in Nuremberg and the museum in Munich have large collections of extant garments, including garments from the 16th century. So I would check out their collections. They have a lot of objects from daily life from that era. And then I'm thinking about the books on my bookshelf. There might have been published. I'm not as up to date on the 16th century literature on 16th century clothing that's available in Germany. There might have been some publications on clothing in 16th century Germany. I'd be shocked if there weren't. But I would definitely start by looking up 16th century woodcuts. And you could even do a search like 16th century Bavarian woodcut in Google and go to the image search and see what that gets you to start with. But there are lots of woodcuts from that era. There's also a lot of artwork from that era. There's a lot of portraits, especially in the Bavarian court. And a lot of those are also in the museums in Munich and Nuremberg. So yeah, there's a pretty rich visual record for what people were wearing. And it's mostly the clothing being worn in Bavaria in that period is very much what's being worn in the Saxon court. So it's what a lot of people are calling a Saxon dress, the sort of, not Landsknecht because it's what the nobility are wearing. But yeah, with the puff and slash sleeves and the puff and slash bodices and that sort of thing. You'll see it. Happily, Bavaria does not fall prey to the Reformation because, you know, the areas of Europe that fall under the Reformation are suddenly all wearing a lot of black, and also Spain is wearing a lot of black, even though that's not Reformationist. But yeah, they're still wearing colors in Bavaria, at least. Let's see. Shakes fist in the air rage. Yeah, I hear you, Esper. Good job. Thank you. Rebags. I've noticed that femininity in general has changed in the West, specifically around bags too. Where I live, it was seen as not feminine to have a large bag. Clutches were still preferred. Yeah. So I've observed that as well, and I wonder if there isn't maybe even a slight reaction in that regard. Oh, look at that. There's a is this? What are you? What are you? What are you doing? Why is there this thread here? Strange. I'll do something about that in a moment. I'm wondering if there is a reaction in women to being maybe forcibly feminized or overly feminized and deciding that they want something practical rather than something that's just pretty. I don't know. Could be. I don't know if I want to wander down that road this morning. Maybe a topic for another one of my live streams with Philip from Irish Medieval History, when we talk about feminism in the Middle Ages. Because there's actually a lot of interesting stuff on that. Christine de Pizan comes to mind immediately, actually. Let me see. I've mended bras in public. No shame here. Yeah. I want to say up until the 2010s, it was considered kind of not ideal to have a huge backpack when I lived in America. It made you a tomboy. Yeah, absolutely. Casually feral. I agree with that 100%. Yep. And I was a tomboy and I had a huge backpack. And I got mocked for it as a tween and a teenager. 100%. I never had a purse in high school. I always had a backpack, and I never had a purse. I always wore a backpack. Now I have an over-the-shoulder satchel, which is kind of like a medieval pilgrim's bag, actually, a scrip. It is a scrip, actually. Yeah, I always had a backpack. I've always had a backpack because, so yeah, why am I criticizing anyone for carrying around a big bag when I always wore a backpack? That was in part, though, because especially when I was still living and working in Germany, I commuted by bike. So the backpack was literally how I brought my, a change of clean clothes, etc., to the office that I could change into after my after my bike ride into the office, and also that I could bring work to and from the office and laptop and that sort of thing. But either way, and then when I was teaching, my first job after graduation was teaching English in Frankfurt. So there I also needed a backpack to carry supplies because I used to go teach at companies and private homes. So I had to bring, lesson materials with me. So yeah, I've also, now that I think about it, always had a backpack with a lot of crap in it. Yeah, let me see. I've mended my underclothes more than once in public. Oh, images or online links. Yeah. So, I'm hopeful. I'm sorry. There's a backlog in the chat. I'm going to pause so I can get to the chat here. I've always had a thing for nice ladies with large bags. Jesus. I look good in black. So yeah. If you, hey, there's Philip. Philip, welcome. I called for him. Yes. Was wondering if at some point, if we want to do one of our live chats together about feminism, medieval feminism, and its role and the role of women in our respective areas of expertise. Yeah. Let's see. I fell down the rabbit hole researching medieval leatherwork for tiny decorated and highly specialized containers for all kinds of things. Oh, yes. Okay, so where I lived in Germany, I lived in the greater Frankfurt area. I lived at the end of, well, what was the end of the S1 line. I assume it's still the end of the S1 line, but maybe they've extended it. Either way, I lived very close to Offenbach, which is where the National Shoe and Leather Museum is located, because Offenbach used to be a place where leather goods were manufactured. And the Shoe and Leather Museum has an amazing collection of medieval leather containers for all molded leather containers for all sorts of things. And so, yeah, I love molded leather containers. I've been trying to get my condottiero to make me some molded leather containers for all the things. I want them for my glassware. I want them for my my tableware, my spoons. I want them for let me see, I'm looking around at my medieval things and seeing what else needs a container. All of it. I love it all. I love molded leather containers. They are fantastic. And especially all that intricate tooling. Ah, so beautiful. Yeah, I've got a real weak spot for molded leather containers. It's not that, God knows, especially by the 15th century, the well-heeled members of society had things. I mean, the death inventory of Lorenzo de' Medici, taken in 1494, reads like a guide to hoarding in the 15th century. Like it is the things this man had in his palazzo, in his collection, it's absolutely amazing. Just so much. See, I'm going to have to do something about that. So much stuff, so many different kinds of things, so many gems and so many ancient Roman antiques and so much armor and so many weapons, so much clothes, so much bedding, so many chalices and just objects from daily life. Like this man, wow. So yeah, especially by the 15th century, medieval people definitely have a need for storage, which is why I really like to look to the 15th century as a guide for kind of more sustainable storage options. So for instance, here we have my, I know I introduced you to this to a lot of you last week. I'm sorry if this is repetitive, but still, it's a bentwood box, right? And it has a lid somewhere. It's over there. It has a lid, but I've had this, we bought this at IKEA in like 2020 or 2020, Jesus, sorry, 2000, in the year 2000. This was bought as a Christmas present for me at IKEA. And specifically, it was the box for my Christmas presents from my dad, who'd bought me a bunch of reenactor goods. And he put them in here, and this was the box for my presents. And now it's my sewing box, because bentwood boxes, even though there's still a thing, a going concern in Sweden now, have been around and used all over medieval Europe, or all over Europe for hundreds of years. And if you start looking at medieval illuminations and miniatures and depictions of paintings depicting daily life, you'll start noticing them everywhere. So we have a whole bunch of bentwood boxes that we use for storing things. I have a handmade basket, round basket over there that is used for storing all of my toiletries. Yeah. So this bentwood box, this baby, she said, a selfer is drooling over the bentwood box, right? So this This thing has literally hundreds of thousands of miles on it because I have flown with this thing everywhere. It goes with me to Pennsic. It goes to any events that I fly to, and I fly to a lot of medievalist events. Goes with me there. So it's been packed in my checked luggage, thrown around by luggage gorillas, and look at the condition that it's still in, despite all of that abuse for 25 years. Yeah, so bentwood box for the win. IKEA used to sell them. I don't think they still do, unfortunately. But it's worth a look. It is absolutely worth a look. Another place to get bentwood boxes is secondhand antique stores. So not so much secondhand stores like Goodwill, but like the antique flea market shops, the ones that are kind of a combination between antique store and secondhand flea market kind of thing. They have some nice antiques, but they also have some kind of crappy stuff. Those are the places where we've gotten some of the most amazing deals on genuine shaker bentwood boxes. Like I've got 2 up there. We got them for $20 each. And that's crazy because those things are handmade. Yeah. So my tip for storage for your medieval and modern life, also covered in my video on must-haves for the modern medievalist. Oh, so I didn't take into account the way this, I don't think it'll be an issue. There's a little bunching there, but I think it'll be okay because I didn't take into account when I was doing this patch that it's kind of over this joint, this right angle here. But it seems to be kind of okay. So I think I'm just going to let it go and see what happens. If I have to put an incision, make an incision so that the patch opens up a little bit to allow for the bend around here, I'll see. I'll make my condottiero put it on and we'll deal with it then. For now, I'm just going to call this good. So this is the patch I did for that hole, therefore. That's what it looks like on the inside. And that's what it looks like on the outside. And I care less about whether that repair shows or not because it's part of the garment that will be covered by his farsetto, unless he's taking off his farsetto to, go to the bathhouse or go get in a street brawl with someone. But usually in 15th century Italy, if you're going to go street brawling, you leave your farsetto on. You don't take it off. Take off the overgarment. Oh, can we see the top of that box? Hold on a minute. Okay, I'm going to go back to, I have a pressed bronze box that I use as my sewing storage box. Ooh, awesome. I adore your little collection of things. Yeah, and I have things. Could we see the top of that box? Yeah, hold on a second. You can still hear me talking. I just have to pop out of screen for a moment. Oh my God, my legs are so stiff. Oh, I don't usually sit for this ever. Like ever. I might have to do some stretching. I don't know if my leg works. Oh God. Okay. So this was, okay, the lid has taken more damage, but I think we can cut it some slack. 500,000 frequent flyer miles is no joke for a box like this. So this is the lid. It just fits on. Just fits on like this. Right. And I added, by added, I mean my wonderful ex-husband, added the leather thong here. He drilled holes into these little wooden ends here and put the leather thong in so that it would be easier to carry it around. Yeah, and then of course I can use the leather thong to secure the lid on if I need to, or I just take some finger loop braiding and tie it around for transport. But it doesn't, pretty much even carrying it around, the lid stays on. So kind of looks like a hat box. Yeah, a little bit. I mean, hat boxes used to be bentwood boxes for certain. What would you own that you suspect will outlive you entirely? Probably my cookware. Not my medieval cookware though, because I destroy my medieval cookware. It ends up shattering or breaking or whatever from heat. The temperature differential. Yeah, what do I have that I think? My tapestries. My tapestries will definitely outlive me. I look forward to bequeathing my tapestries to some deserving medievalist who wants to turn their home into some beautiful medieval space. So yeah, that's my goal. I don't want, so the reason I was able to buy all of these tapestries for really cheaply, by the way, is that I think people used to go, travelers used to go to Belgium and France and go to the tapestry workshops, and or the museums, and they would buy these replica tapestries at the museums and bring them home as a souvenir and hang them in their home. But then they would die, And their heirs, whoever inherited their things, aren't into this look. And it wasn't a memory for them. So they ended up, all of these have ended up on the market. You can find these on eBay really cheaply. I have a video about that too. If you look up tapestry on my page, you can look up how to get tapestries. Look, medieval tapestries and where to find them, I think it's called. Yeah. Comment, I'm not surprised that IKEA had bentwood boxes. My mom had a small bentwood box with rose mailing on it. If anyone modern would be producing more, it would be probably IKEA. Well, yeah, especially because in Sweden, they still use bentwood boxes. Like, it's still a thing. It's like still part of their daily lives. So yeah, if anyone was going to reproduce some kind of traditional Swedish handcraft, it would be IKEA. It's a shame that they stopped selling them because they're really great. They really are. And I wish I had realized just how great it was and how much I needed more of them back when IKEA was still selling them and I had actually bought more, but I didn't. So here we are. I only have the one IKEA cheap bentwood box and the others are all, antiques or handmade by someone else for much more money than I would have paid at IKEA. But that's okay. Because unfortunately, IKEA does have their things manufactured in China. So I don't really shop there anymore. um, I don't judge other people who do. I just am trying to buy fewer things made either or secondhand things or things made by hand by an artisan and pay a little bit more money, but thereby support a local artisan rather than, where I'm going with this. Your box, your box is very cute. Really dig the leather string. It looks lovingly used. Yeah, it's loving. I'm not certain how loved the box feels, but I certainly have used it. And in with all the love that I can feel towards an inanimate object. Yeah, no, this thing has been this thing represents a lot of memories actually. I had no idea. I'll have to check out acquiring some tapestries. I'm a textile artist and could probably maintain them okay. Tapestries, these babies, they're hardy. They do well on their own. They really don't. They just need to be in, reasonably climate controlled environment. They don't need a lot of special TLC. These aren't these are not antiques. These are not. This is not a 16th. By the way, you can also buy medieval tapestries on eBay. I would never do that though, with very good reason, because a real medieval tapestry, a real Renaissance tapestry needs serious special conditions. You need good climate, humidity and temperature control, no direct exposure to light. Like that's, no, I don't want that level of responsibility. I'm happy with my replicas. Yeah, so if you're interested in replica tapestries, I do have a video on some of my replica tapestries. Actually, one of my giant Hunt of the Unicorn replica tapestry that I also have. I did a video on that one. Yeah. At least describe problems to a restorationist, but I'm aware of different material limitations. Yeah, it's so again, these are not original medievals. These are like 50 or 60 years old, not 500 or 600 years old. Oh my goodness, yeah. Restoring textiles is a whole fascinating art in and of itself. Do I have my book on restoring textiles here? I do. I have a couple actually that talk about restoring historical textiles. Okay. So that patch is done. Now the other thing that has happened, oh, sorry, I've got to stretch. Oh God. Oh, my poor legs. My poor legs. I just did a kickboxing workout before this and I didn't really stretch properly and then I sat down and now I'm all stiff. I did mention that I usually work on an elliptical cross trainer doing my video editing, right? That's how not good I am at sitting still. Okay, so this shirt was designed to be open slightly on the sides. That's why there is a slit here. But my condottiero moving in the way he does, he has caused the slit on this side to open up way more. So this is the side slit here on the side of the shirt. And what I now have to decide if I'm going to do is if I'm going to, whip stitch it back down to where it was open before, or if I'm going to leave it open as far as it is and just whip stitch that closed. And I already know the answer. So that was all Socratic dialogue. I'm just going to whip stitch it closed in the spot where it has naturally come open to, because I'm not going to fight nature. There's no point in fighting where this shirt very clearly naturally wants to open based on how my condottiero wears it and moves in it. And I'm not going to try to fight it because here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, for those who don't know, you always want your seams to be weaker than your fabric. Because if you make a really strong seam, eventually some force is going to be exerted on the garment and there will be a choice. Either the seam will give or the fabric will give. And if your seam is super strong, the fabric will give. So always make your seams weaker. I don't mean that you should make it so that you touch them and they fall out, but you want the seam to give, the thread of your seam to give, not the fabric. So don't make your seams too strong or you will regret it. Ask me how I know this. Some of you have maybe heard the tale of the pink kirtle of doom. I actually covered, I think, my medieval sewing mistakes video. If you look up my recent-ish medieval sewing mistakes videos, there's a section on that poor pink dress, where I specifically talk about the strength of seams and why you want weak seams. Because it was a pink backlacing kirtle, and I unfortunately made that before I realized that backlacing kirtles were not a thing in the 15th century. But anyway, it's a pink backlacing kirtle, short-sleeved, wool, fully lined in a blue linen, and kind of designed actually to be reversible originally. And I had not had it for very long. I think I had just finished sewing it, in fact. And maybe the second event at which I'd ever worn it. No, that's not true. I lie. Fourth event at which I'd ever worn it. And I was teaching dance, and it was a fast dance called Petite Rose, which involves a lot of piva, for those who know what those are. And it's a couples dance, so you dance with a partner, and there were different couples scattered around the floor. And I was dancing also because there weren't enough partners for everyone, so I stepped in and partnered the spare person, as it were, as I do. And as we were dancing around the piva, which is this ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, it's a step that moves, and it moves relatively quickly, and it moves distance. I was dancing, and this gentleman forgot where he was in the dance, and he stopped on my train, on the train of my kirtle. And I kept dancing because it was still the part where you're supposed to be moving forward. And it shredded along the waist and along the back where the lacing was. Not the seam, the fabric shredded. It practically unwove itself. Now, you can imagine I was certainly not going to just throw this hand-sewn pink wool kirtle away. No. So I ended up having to completely reconstruct with like 1,000 tiny little stitches and some linen as patch on which to base it, just completely reconstruct the side seams and the back seams. I discussed that in more detail in that video on my medieval sewing mistakes. Yeah. Okay, so hopefully I didn't make that too strong as I'm sitting there talking about don't do this, and then I do it. Yeah, do as I say, not as I do, ladies and gentlemen. Also, a reminder, if you haven't already hit that thumbs up, please do. Also, consider subscribing. Really helps the channel. And if you have just joined, please do drop any comments or questions in the chat. I am here to be social while also working on repairing garments that need repair. And I'll make my condottiero remove those loose threads. Okay, patch is done there. There still needs to be a little patch here, but I don't happen to have any extra linen. So I think I'm going to call that good. Let me see. Thought I just saw a comment pop up, but then it vanished. So who knows? Right, turn this right side out, and then I'll show you what it looks like. One last time. 15th century Italian man's undershirt, a camicia, as they're called in Italian. And now we've got that hole is all patched. Yep, good to go. Next in the list of items, oh my goodness. So this is my kamicha, my 1470s through 90s kamicha. I actually recently just redid the neckline on this. So because the original casing around the pleats had completely worn away, and so I had to remove that and basically apply a completely new neckline, which is why it's a different color of linen, because I no longer have any more of this linen. I just had some of my new whiter linen in there. That's fine. No one should be looking at the inside of my kamicha anyway. So I thought I saw there was somewhere here where a hole had come up and I needed to actually repair it. Let's see, like the seam, not a hole in the fabric, but a hole in the seam. That being said, I'm pretty certain I also saw that I developed what I call a derriere hole, because at medieval living history events, and I probably spend at least 3 weeks of the year camping medievally and wearing these clothes on 24 hours a day, and I therefore sleep in my smock for warmth usually. And I develop what I call a derriere spot, which is the spot where my butt actually presses into the linen when I'm sleeping, and eventually I wear through. Apparently, I have a powerful derriere, and it wears through my smock. So I was wondering if I had developed a hole like that in the back of this one, and I don't think I have yet. Okay, so maybe this one didn't need any repairs. Well, that's good. It's nice when I don't have to repair every single thing all the time. You can already see some of the underarm repairs I did there. Oh, look, there's some more stitches that have gone. Okay, well, since I already have the white needle threaded, or the needle threaded with white thread, might as well go ahead and close that up before it decides to get wider. So what is the favorite garment that I've ever made? Oh my, wow. Yeah, that's an interesting question. My favorite thing that I've ever made. Favorite garment that I've ever made. Oh yeah, let's see. I really enjoy structured garments. Um, by which I mean fitted, very fitted and tailored. But what I really enjoy, especially with men's clothing, structuring with padding, which is a thing that's done in 14th and 15th century fitted coats or doublets, farsetti, whatever you want to call them. And I really enjoy that process. I don't know why. Possibly because it's more complex. It's a higher level of tailoring, so it's therefore more interesting to me. So yeah, my condottiero is farsetto, which is not anywhere around here. The new one that we're making, possibly, and also because I love quilting. I don't mean patchwork quilts, I mean quilting. I love doing quilting in like tight little rows of stitches and just making it look like it's been sewn by machine when it's been actually sewn by hand. And since I've actually found evidence in an expense account for the bodices of women's gamore also having been padded, I'm going to apply that to the next one, and I might even retroactively build padding into the bodice of this one. It was the expense account from Marco Parenti for the wedding garments for his new bride, and it actually included just enough cotton wool batting or cotton wool to pad a bodice. And it was listed under materials for the cota. So I'm thinking, even though that was like 1447, I think I'm probably going to be applying it retroactively to this 1480s Gamora, just because I think that will really help create that really smooth curve that you see in all of these portraits. You're thinking to yourself, it can't be that their chests actually just naturally form that curve. And unless you're really busty, it's actually hard to form yourself into that curve. And I'm not super busty. So I'm thinking if I add the shaped padding to this, it will maybe create that more rounded look that I'm going for. Oh, thank you for joining Casually Feral. Hopefully see you at the next one. I'll be doing these every Saturday unless I'm at a living history thing, or every Friday, Saturday. Maybe see you tomorrow for our talk on homosexuality in the Middle Ages if you have time. Otherwise, have a lovely evening, afternoon, morning, whatever time of day it is where you are. Yeah, I really enjoy garments that involve detail work. um, which is funny because normally I don't like getting into the details of other kinds of things, not handcraft related, but yeah, I enjoy things that are futzy and complicated and challenging. And I love layers. And but I would say one of the most favorite things I've ever made. Therefore, oh, um, uh, there are when I was queen in the SCA of the Kingdom of Drachenwald, which was Europe, for those who know what that is, I for my coronation, I made this gown, this Burgundian style gown from the 1470s that was yellow silk satin and peppered, diapered entirely in black applique silk dragons. And each of those dragons had to be hand appliqued on. And so it was actually a group project. I would bring the pieces of this dress before it was assembled to events. And many of us would sit around together and sew on the dress and chat about it. And it was a really great, and because it was a great social time. Like it was a great sharing, creative, collaborative experience. And we just had fun and we laughed and working on this thing together towards a common goal. And the pieces of the dress were so big because it's, massive train, really full skirts. It was big enough that we could like on one panel you could easily have three people working and not get in each other's way. And on some of the bigger back panels with the train, probably five or six people. So that might be the favorite thing I've ever made just because of what it represented, a very happy time in my life, this gorgeous experience of collaboration and how everyone just gave their time and their skills to help. And I literally would have people, men and women, who just said, I just want to sew at least one dragon on so that I can be part of your dress, so that I can help you because I love you and I respect you. And I'm really happy you're going to be our queen. And I just want to have helped at least a little bit. Right. So all sorts of levels of skill. It wasn't just not at all, not just the most skilled people at all. It was people of all levels helping build this dress. And it was, yeah, that might be my most favorite thing. Unfortunately, it had some pretty fatal tailoring flaws around the shoulders that I need to fix, specifically with the arm's eye. So it's basically been out of commission since I stepped down and started trying to repair those. I really need to just do that. Maybe I'll work on that in one of my upcoming live streams. You'll get a fitting and fixing a gown live stream where we work on trying to patch up add the pieces to the arm's eye that I need to make it actually sit on my shoulders properly. That dress is also discussed in my medieval sewing mistakes, and you can see more detailed what I'm talking about there. The dress included. Yeah, thank you. It is, oh, it's been a long time since I've seen you, Terang Reels. Thank you for joining. And yeah, it is a really sweet memory. It really was. Too bad I wasn't doing content creation back then. That would have been an amazing thing to live stream and share with all of you out there in the world too. And also, not just the dragons, but once the dragons were appliqued, then they helped with the seams. We were literally, as a group, collectively working on that dress up until like the night before the coronation ceremony. So at the coronation event, all of us in this reconstructed Norse village outside of Stockholm, feeling like we're back in the 15th century, and we're all sitting out there on benches just working on this dress together. Yeah, it's a pretty happy memory. Yeah, the dragon dress is pretty gorgeous. She is pretty impressive. Oh, I see this has moved. Sorry about that. I didn't realize that the camera had moved. That's showing me sewing. Okay. Locking into place. Burying the needle and snipping. Again, I feel a little bit like I'm on the Learning Channel doing surgery and reporting everything I do as I do it for the record. The most favorite thing I ever made was a Viking apron dress from a grave find. The dragon dress sounds amazing. Oh yeah, and it's really satisfying to make something based on a grave find because like that to me is getting the closest you can get to the people who lived in that era is recreating something that they actually wore. And I actually have. A Norse apron dress that was made for that coronation, not for the ceremony, but for wearing at the event in general, because it was a reconstructed 10th century Norse village that actually had some Norse grave mounds in the sort of off to the side of it. So I did have proper 10th century Norse clothing for the rest of the event. But for my ceremony, by God, we went Burgundian. We went, well, French, because Burgundy wasn't a kingdom. It didn't make it. It almost made it, but like a gas giant, it failed to become a star. But yeah, we did the full French medieval 14th, 15th century French coronation ceremony. So by God, I was not going to go Viking for my coronation. But I did have appropriate Norse attire for the rest of the event so that I would, fit in with the general theme. It's funny, a lot of people told me, well, you should do Norse at this one, and then for your next one, you can do Burgundian. And I said, there's no guarantee there's going to be a next one. And guess what? There wasn't a next one. So I was right. Ha! History has justified my choice. And not on purpose. We tried. I tried to be queen again. It just never worked out. That's okay. Well, here is the repair on that seam that was coming loose. So that's all nice and tightened again. See if I can find any other loose seams that need repair. Yeah, I just enjoy the act of creation. It's funny. I enjoy games, but I enjoy creating things more. So if I'm given a choice between sitting and creating something, anything, whether it's calligraphy and illumination, whether I'm painting, whether I'm sewing, whether I'm weaving, embroidery, leatherwork, I don't care. I would 100% rather sit there and craft something than play a game. That's me. It brings me so much more joy. Playing games almost feels a little bit like a waste of time. And that's not judgmental. There is one game I do enjoy because it's very medieval, it's very 15th century, and it really helps put me in a 15th century Contessa mood. And that's a game that in German is called Pochen, or Glick in 15th century French. But yeah, otherwise, trivia games I also enjoy, but I can sew while doing trivia games. So you said it was made on a grave find. Joshua, the Viking apron dress that was made on grave finds. Which grave finds? Some of the Burka grave finds or something else? Something maybe more complete. Most of the Norse era grave finds with which I'm familiar, most of them anyway, at least for feminine garments, I'm not personally aware of full feminine garments that have survived. We have some intact male garments from that era. I was wondering maybe if you actually stumbled across like a mostly complete apron dress, or are we talking about where like there's bits that have survived protected by the metal of the brooches? I'll just let that question sit there. Yeah, that's a good question. What favorite things have you all made out there in watching land? It's an interesting question. Yeah, that dress is definitely my favorite for the composite memories. It's also a little bit not my favorite because there ended up being major tailoring issues in the shoulder. I discussed that in my medieval mistakes video, and so because of that, it was very fussy and it didn't sit right. And I've kind of dreaded having to reconstruct the arm's eye and shoulder on that because I had to do that on the companion gown that was made at the same time, my pink Burgundian gown, and that was such a pain in the ass that I'm not looking forward to replicating it on the dragon dress. So literally, I've been stalling for, what year is it? 15 years. I've been stalling on reconstructing the dragon dress for 15 years because of what a pain in the ass it is. But I'm going to do it. I really do. I want to do it. I want to fix it and wear it again. It deserves to be seen. No, it's just from the top part protected by brooches and beads. Yeah, it's always frustrating. You get these entire men's garments, like men fall in bogs. in their garments in the first millennium, all over Europe where there are bogs. They fall into these bogs in their clothes, and the bogs preserve the clothes almost perfectly. Meanwhile, women don't seem to be falling into bogs at the same rate, or they're falling into bogs in the Bronze Age with their clothing then being preserved. It's just not fair. Why couldn't women be drunk and clumsy and fall into bogs the way the men did? At least that's my theory on how a lot of those men ended up in bogs. Some of them are ritual sacrifices, and I'm not disrespecting that, but some of them really were just they must have been drunk and they fell in and died. Or I guess they could have been murdered and put in the bog to hide their body, but it doesn't seem to happen for women. Hello from Scotland. Good morning, I guess it must be. Good morning from, I'm in Daegu actually, outside of, kind of near Busan in Korea. So I guess it must be what time is it? It must be very early in the morning. Well, relatively early, medium early in the morning in Scotland, I guess. Thank you for joining us. Comment, I made a Byzantine outfit, spent 150 hours hand beating. Oh yeah. Yeah. But you know, man, Byzantine outfits, what satisfaction that would be from all that beautiful, beautiful handwork. Yeah, goodness. I mean, the embroidered, some of you have maybe seen the gold fleur-de-lis embroidery that's on the sleeve of my green kota in one of my earlier getting dressed videos, and maybe seen it in some of my dance footage. That embroidery, just that gold fleur-de-lis embroidery, that's probably 100 hours total. There was a lot of work went into that fleur-de-lis, and that's just just one patch. So imagine doing that to cover the entire garment, which was often done. A lot of these, especially in the 15th century and at late 14th, 15th century in France and Germany, or France and Italy and England, they were actually having embroidery appliques made to go on these giant garments they were wearing. And you're talking 100 of these hand applique pieces of embroidery, of these embroidered pieces of embroidery to be hand appliqued onto the garment. It just as elaborate as that one I have on my sleeve in some cases. I mean, the time and effort that would go into building one of these amazing overgarments, what some people call a houppelande or a gown in English, is crazy. Oh, sorry. Okay, well, I declare this one fit for active duty. Onto the fit for active duty pile. Sorry, I've got to bring my legs up and sit Indian style. Or sit in lotus position. This is just not, much better. Okay, so then next on the docket is, wait, what? Your Byzantine ensemble got thrown out? Okay, Lisa, I think I need a little more details. What happened? Who threw it out? Are they still alive? They wouldn't be if they'd thrown mine out. While Lisa tells us more about what is clearly a really horrific, tragic story. Next thing that needs repairs is one of my other kirtles. This is a linen kirtle. And this one actually has a ruffle on the bottom, what I call a dust ruffle, but I've never seen it called that in period. It has a dust ruffle on the bottom all the way around in the same fabric. And if you start looking closely at 15th century kirtles, especially in France, you will actually see this ruffle of fabric that is the same as the main part of body of the dress, but it's actually as a gathered extra hem on the bottom. And I know why. It makes total sense. It's a replaceable hem. And there's actually an expense account. I think Edward III's queen, Philippa of Hainaut, her expense accounts, now I know that's in the 1350s, but hear me out. Her expense accounts actually mention the payment to a tailor or seamstress for re-hemming the gown. And it's the way it was phrased, it really heavily implies that the rehemming was attached. It was a band that was attached. So in the 15th century, you start seeing this very visible band attached to the bottom of these kirtles, and it makes sense because this part of the dress takes so much damage that it wears away. And so you can just replace just this part of the band without having to worry about damage to the main part of the body. So when I made this back in 2013, that's the technique I used, and I've really been happy with it. As pieces have worn away, I've just been able to hem up a little further. I haven't had to replace the whole band at all. And I think I saw that there was part of it had fallen. Yeah, so there we have fallen hem. Also, lots of cat fur where my kitties have nested on it. So I'm going to trim away the necrotic tissue, following up in the operation metaphor, the surgery metaphor. Okay. Oh, and I see there might have been a spot where the seam has come out. Okay. Go ahead and put in some clamps, known in the sewing world as pins. Oh my God, your father thought bags from Penzik were trash. Oh my God. That's literally heartbreaking, Lisa. Oh my God. Oh my God. Wow. Just wow. Oh, I am really hideously sorry to hear that. And it being your father, you can't even really take a proper revenge. That's even worse. Oh my God. Any tips on removing cat fur from wool? It is such a pain. Well, the first thing I always do is get one of those rollers, those adhesive rollers, and roll the wool that way, and to remove off the initial excess. Um, but otherwise, yeah. Mm, trying to think. Um, what have I done for the wool or the extra wool that my cats have added to my wool? Yeah, usually I take tape, sometimes duct tape. If the roller isn't strong enough, I'll actually take duct tape and use that to pull the cat fur off. Because otherwise, you're right, it actually gets incorporated into the wool if cats really nest down. And I found out why cats love wool, by the way. It's because the lanolin in the wool, and even if the lanolin's been removed, there's still some vestigial remnants of it. There's a compound in the lanolin that triggers a cat's kitten response. That's why they'll also often get on wool and start kneading and pseudo-nursing, because it triggers it's a pheromone. It's similar to the mother's pheromone to make their kittens nurse. So it triggers a response, and that's why cats love nesting on wool. And, the more unprocessed the wool, probably the more they'll like it. So I found a sheep farm in Upper New York State who was selling raw sheep's wool. Not like fleece, like it had been separated from it's from shearing. So it was just literally this giant roll of semi-processed, but not really processed wool batting, just this giant roll. And I wanted that because I wanted to be able to use it to do the layering of the wool in an authentic medieval manner and the padding for the chest of a farsetto. So that part was fine, but what that meant is it still had a lot of lanolin left in it. So it smelled like sheep. And my cat went crazy in that it was in a plastic trash bag in a closet. She used her paw to open like an IKEA cabinet kind of closet. Used her paw to open the cabinet, got in, tore the bag open so she could get into the bag and nest in it. Yeah, kitties, man. Kitties. Yeah. The title is crazy. Which title? Stitchin' Bitch? That's a common expression in the crafting world, my friend. Welcome to the world of crafting. Oh, I see this needs a lot more fixing than just that one little fallen spot. Well, we'll start what the hell was I doing here? Huh. I apparently did a running stitch on this hem, God knows how long ago. And it is just generally wearing away. Well, that's not surprising. I think that's the part of the dress that drags. Yeah, and clearly I also need to actually give this a tub soak because from the last event at which it was worn, it still has lots of event mud. No, that will turn my tub a delightful color. Maybe I will. You know what? I think I'm going to wait until I launder this so that I'm not stitching in the dirt. I'll launder it and then I'll deal with that. Okay. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've reached the point at which we're going to go to our book corner. So let us start. I actually asked the condottiero to go and just hit the bookshelves and pull out whatever he thought might be interesting, rare, and useful for today's discussion. Today's sip and bitch. Sip and stitch and bitch. Okay, so for those of you who are interested in the formal sort of headwear that I should be wearing with this outfit if I were wearing the whole outfit, the École du Louvre, the Louvre School, actually published 3 years ago at this point, a book on the not a hennin, as I call it. So you all may think that that tall pointy hat, the one in this picture, is called a hennin. It was not in the Middle Ages at all. It was called, in French, it was called a grande corne or an haut à tour. In English, it was called a mitre or a horn. Yeah, so not a hennin. The word hennin doesn't apply to it at all. Anyway, they published this book on the not a hennin, and I have a video on the not a hennin. If you're 2 videos and then one that's a supercut, if you're interested in that. And it actually has. I didn't realize that before because I wasn't tracking just how important that was. It actually has Margaret Fitzgerald's effigy. She's an Irish noblewoman from the 16th century. Put it this way, yeah, right there. Which I will be discussing this effigy in my video on 15th century Irish fashion, on women's Irish fashion, which will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned on that one. Anyway, this book is really valuable in part for the pictures, but also for the scholarship. It talks a lot about the social context of this headwear and how it was definitely a point of difference between the aristocracy and the merchant class. And there's a lot of, primary sources that are presented in whole pieces for you to get an idea about the greater picture of it. Yeah, so I can definitely recommend this book. Grande Corne et Haut à Tour, le hennin et la mode au Moyen Âge. Now, it's a little disappointing also because it doesn't actually get into practical aspects like how it was actually, like theories on what it actually was, how the layers it actually contained, how it was worn. They don't talk about any of that. So it's definitely more on the theoretical sociology of fashion history and the origins of it and where it may have come from, where it might be going. It's also a little disappointing too because they use as part of their visual evidence for this headdress that was definitely really worn by real people. They use a lot of allegorical and post factum artwork. So they use allegorical artwork that isn't depicting real people. And they also use artwork that definitely postdates the age of the not a hennin, which means that it was being depicted in a historiographical kind of way, which means not in a way that it was probably really actually worn because it was being painted by someone who'd probably never seen one in reality. Right. So yeah, a little disappointing, but still also a really good book. And again, with Google Translate being what it is these days, I bet it can handle large swaths of this French text if your French isn't strong enough to get you through. Okay. If you have any questions about this, drop them in the chat. Let's move on to our next must-have for the medievalist. Oh, hi from Australia. I'm looking forward to your Irish women's clothing video as my 12-year-old is learning towards a persona from 15th century Ireland. Well, fantastic. Then I've got some really interesting stuff for you coming up. Yeah, I found some really good stuff for 15th century women's fashion. It's probably not going to be what a lot of people are expecting when it comes to Irish fashion because most of what people think of when they think of historical Irish fashion, medieval Irish fashion, is in fact solidly 16th century, and I would argue doesn't predate the 16th century. So yeah, I'm hoping I'll get that out sooner than later. It just, let me tell you, each video takes 50 hours or more of work. Like I put a lot of effort into my finished polished videos in terms of not even necessarily including the research, just the editing part of putting it together and making it pretty and providing visual aids and all that. So hopefully, on that note, if anyone would like to support that work, I have a YouTube channel membership and a patron. So there's two options for direct financial support, or there's always a super thanks. Yeah, if you can't, if your financial situation doesn't allow it, that's totally fine. I'm just happy that you're here with me getting creative and that I can share my passion with you all. So the next book that will be of interest is the Howard household books. Household books are like spying on someone's daily life, because what you get in these books, and this is might be a little small to get there, what you get in these books are household accountings of everything they've purchased, what it was, how much it cost, of payments made to people, um, who who made the thing. And we're talking fashion garments like this. The Howards became the Duke of Norfolk in the second half of the 15th century. Thank you, War of the Roses. They were elevated to Dukes of Norfolk. And so they had men at arms. We've got detailed accountings for armor, all the layers for harness, arming garments, hosen, shoes, bills for repair work. So the Howard household books covers like a 30-year period. Great find, really. You can actually get this for free on Google Books. You can access it electronically on Google Books, but I wanted the printed version so that I could leaf through it whenever I wanted. I prefer leafing through things than looking at digital stuff. Anyway, any set of household books is definitely a great way to get a picture of how people were living in the Middle Ages, how they were spending their money, what they were eating. You know, the grocery bills in here are fascinating because of the range of spices they purchase, the foodstuffs they purchase. But also what's interesting is the number of women that they've employed to make garments, for example, men's and women's garments. So it's not just tailors making the garments, there's a lot of women making them too. So yeah, Howard household books for the win. This is along the fashion history line. Ritorno alla luce is a book that is about an extant farsetto, a doublet from the 1430s from Italy. There aren't many of these, by the way, so that's pretty exciting. And it's about its restoration process. So this book, it's in Italian, but again, with Google Translate, you can probably get through, but even just the pictures are super valuable because it provides high definition photos of the original garment in its various stages. It shows, you know, a hypothetical reconstruction of what it should look like. It provides some really high definition up close photos of the various layers. So you can see the lining and the interlining and the shell and even the stitches in some cases. So if you're interested in 15th century fashion, even Irish fashion, this is going to be a good resource because we just don't have many garments from the 15th century in Europe. So every garment, no matter where it's from, helps give us at least some picture of, you know, tailoring and construction methods for the rest of Europe. Because they weren't, let's be honest, they weren't that different, the tailoring and construction methods. They really weren't. Because with the extant garments we do have, we can tell that there's vast similarities. So yeah, definitely a must-have for the fashion historian. And by the way, everyone, my battery's really low, so if the stream cuts out this time, it's because the devices have died a horrible, horrible death. In which case, I thank you all for joining. Please hit that thumbs up. But I'm going to keep going and presenting books until the last.